Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Stokastic NBA Deeper Dive presented by No House Advantage. Got a 10-game slate tonight in NBA, and it should be a great one for some betting, some DFS. And we got the perfect guy to help us break down our options tonight. Adam, Shit My Money Share. Adam, how you doing, man?
Doing pretty well. Feels like probably the most interesting NBA slate we've had in a while. So looking forward to talking about that. I don't think we've done a show together in a while, so it should be a good time.
Definitely, yeah. This one's a pretty interesting one because like you got some superstars already out that creates massive value. So like you can build some lineups that project really, really well. In general, when you got like really good plays like this that are also high owned, I feel like that does make it a little bit tougher to get contrarian and still have a fighting chance. So what kind of adjustments do you make on a site like this?
I typically end up getting on chalk, at least that I think is good. I end up going pretty heavy on that, and then just within an individual lineups, you'll see one or two plays where it's just like, even when I'm looking at the lineup, it's like, oh, like why is that guy in this lineup? And I look at the rest of the lineup, it's like, oh, well, it's like six of the best plays on the slate, and then two just good options that hopefully do well. So typically that's sort of how my exposures will look out or look. It is nice with it being a 10 game slate too. Like you're going to get obviously the best plays are going to be really popular, but not quite as popular as they would be in terms of raw ownership on smaller slates typically. So it does just make it a little bit easier to build contrarian lineups that are still just really good lineups.
Definitely, yeah. Like getting contrarian just means maybe going to some good plays, like you're saying, and not going too off the board tonight. So should be a fun one where if you're paying attention to all these injuries, you should be able to get a big advantage. Like the general thing you want is a line with a good chance of cash that has enough differentiation to make it to the top. So that's really what we're going to be bringing to you today. Guys, before we get into the picks, if you could hit that thumbs up button, we greatly appreciate the support. And also, if you aren't already subscribed to Stokastic, hit that subscribe button. The bell next to that allows you to see when we go live every day. So when we, bringing all this great content for you. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. All right, let's get on to the games. So number one, we got Oklahoma City at Washington. Bradley Beal's back for this one, I think. And on the OKC side, it seems like this has been a team that loves to mess with their starting lineup. But aside from that, like okay, so Baisley's out. He's been out a couple of games. Trey Man's out. Nothing really too significant injury wise. So what are you seeing here?
Um, Not a ton that stands out. It's a really frustrating team in general. You obviously have a few really good options with SGA, Giddy, and that's about it.
Fair enough. You gotta
Like,
give us a little bit more than that. But
yeah, I mean, it's those guys both look really good. Obviously, on a lot of different slates, they would look better in terms of priority wise, but they're still just really solid plays. And they're two of the guys sort of that I was referring to earlier, where they're going to be popular, but they're not going to be that popular because everybody's going to be focused on getting to guys that are on teams that are missing Nikola Jokic or Luka Doncic or others. So you're going to just get modest ownership on these guys. But SGA is averaging 1.4 DraftKings points per minute in the games he's played with Giddy this year. He was averaging 1.5 in the games without him. Giddy himself is averaging about 1.1 DraftKings points per minute. He's up to playing around 33 minutes a night now and still reasonably priced. So both of those guys are going to look good. You have Lou Dort, who's averaging around 30, 31 minutes per game. Not really something I care about on this slate. Pokashevsky coming off of a massive game. If you told me he's going to play 38 minutes again, he would look fantastic. The issue is just that you get those games here and there from him, but even with them being somewhat shorthanded, like they don't have Trey Mann, they don't have Darius Baisley, they still have so many bodies. They threw the other Jalen Williams into the rotation last game for a few minutes. He hadn't really played this year. They still have a lot of different ways they can go to where I don't really feel comfortable going north of like 28 minutes or so on Pokashevsky, which makes him look fine, but just not like something I'm going to get much of on this slate. So really, I think it's going to end up being SGA and Giddy as far as the guys I get to from this team.
nice. Yeah, one thing with Pogashevsky, he looks like a decent value, but like it's just like a killer value. But he is matched up against Porzingis tonight. Like, it's kind of an interesting matchup because two like super tall, like guys, maybe similar playing style where they have more of an outside game.
It
Like, do you see anything there?
so that could be the matchup. I don't know what the starting lineup's going to be. They've kind of been going Pokashevsky and Robinson Earl together like every other game, and then sometimes instead of Robinson Earl, it's either Aaron Wiggins or Jalen Williams, the guard. Last game it was Jalen Williams, the guard. So I don't know if they go back to Robinson Earl today and go with like a little bit bigger front court. I don't know what they'll do. I do think it's better for Pokashevsky if he's at the five. Just that's typically how it works for everybody.
Definitely, fantasy wise. And Porzingis plays more outside, so I think it makes sense that they might roll with that starting line, but we'll see. Any read on Jalen Williams? He's only 3,900. He's been playing. He played a lot. He plays a lot of minutes when he starts, I guess. And then I don't know much about him. Maybe like what kind of player is he?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much interest in him on this slate. He's not a great point per minute guy, and it's really tough. Like when you're playing with SGA and Josh Giddey, there's only so much you can do. Overall, this year he's averaged 3/4 of a fantasy point per minute. Even if he does start, again, you sort of have to worry about the playing time. I'm not convinced he starts. Obviously, we'll have that starting lineup before lock, but one way or the other, I just think there's so much value on this slate that's not a spot that I'm really going to be getting to.
Nice. On the Washington side, Bradley Beal's back, so that could impact the rotation pretty significantly, where we saw Kispert starting. So he's going back to the bench probably. Monty Morris probably not getting much as much ball handling duties. So I'm not seeing like very much you can do in DFS on the Washington side. What are you thinking today?
Yeah, I'm not seeing a ton. Bradley Beal is pretty cheap, but again, there's just so many huge priorities that I don't think Beal's one of them. If you're playing 150 lineups, I would expect that you're getting a little bit. I did crunch some lineups for Yahoo before the show and was getting to him more there than I am on DraftKings. But he's 8,300 on DraftKings. So like obviously there's a ceiling, but we have seen his usage come down this year. He's taken on more of a playmaking role, looking to get Kristaps Porzingis and Kyle Kuzma more involved. Monte Morris averaging 28 minutes per game in the games he's played with Beal in and DeLon Wright out. I'm expecting similar playing time here. He has kind of run bad in terms of assists so far this year, getting unlucky. Beal being back, hopefully helps convert those a bit, but still certainly not any level of a priority. On DraftKings, the guy from this team I'm actually getting to the most is Porzingis, and that's at like 10%. He's averaged about 1.2 DraftKings points per minute in the games he's played with Beal this year. He's averaging about 31 minutes per game. It's a perfectly good matchup for him. I think he looks actually even better on FanDuel than he does DraftKings, because on FanDuel you have power forward and center eligibility as opposed to just center. So he's the guy I like the most from Washington. But again, not really any priorities for me there. I like SGA and Giddey on the other side more than I like anything from the Wizards.
Nice. Yeah, Porzingis. It reminds me, I was like going through some old papers today, and I wrote this journal entry about height, and I'm like, I was like in elementary school, and I was like, being a tall and short has disadvantages. Like if you're small, if you're like a spy, you could blend into a crowd really easily. Where if you're tall, you're playing basketball, you could block a lot of shots and also avoid your shot getting blocked. So
That describes Porzingis.
that's what reminded me of it. Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next game. Indiana at Charlotte. Okay, so we got on the Indiana side, pretty frustrating team so far this year, because if the bench unit is playing well, that means like a lot of these starters end up playing a lot less minutes. So um it's been pretty all over the place, but Halliburton has been a pretty good fantasy option. Miles Turner gets a ton of blocks, so pretty volatile. Who are your favorite Pacers tonight?
Yeah, so I mean, we have the Q tag on Halliburton, so that is one big piece of news that we're waiting on. But assuming he's in, this is another team that I think you basically are just using as that differentiation piece in some lineups, because if Halliburton's in, it does mean that they're healthy. And Miles Turner certainly has a high ceiling. Like you said, he's volatile, he blocks a lot of shots, but you have Dallas, you have Bam out, you have Jokic out. So like there's just guys that are a lot more mispriced than Turner is. Same goes for Halliburton. He's a really high upside option. He's been fantastic this year. He's averaging 34 minutes per game. He's also $9,300 on a fully healthy team. So it's just difficult to say he's a priority, because you have to start then saying, oh, well, that means I'm playing him over Jamal Murray, or I'm playing him over, Spencer Dinwiddie and stuff like that at the guard spots. And I think you're an insane person if you're doing that. So pretty tough to say that. So I think it's a very good team to kind of just be mixing and matching guys in. Jalen Smith is cheap. Speaking of volatility, I mean, the guy's minutes are all over the place. His production's all over the place. But overall, he's greater than a 1 fantasy point per minute guy at 5K flat. So he's another one. Buddy Hield certainly fits the mold as well. They're all just pieces where individually, I think you can mix them in, get them at relatively low ownership, and it's a nice way to differentiate your lineup. If Halliburton were to sit, then you're getting another really good value guard, most likely in TJ McConnell. And then you're also opening more minutes, I would expect, for Benedict Mathurin, who we know is a very, very good scorer. Both of those guys would look a lot better to me if Halliburton's out.
That makes a lot of sense. So if Halliburton is out, do you expect TJ McConnell to get the start? Because I know
I think
in the
so.
past there's been a lot of McConnell slates where at 3,400 tonight on DK, 3,900 FanDuel. How close to like a lock would he be?
If he's starting, I think it's pretty close. The only reason that I wouldn't say it's higher is that there's just like you already have Dinwiddie, you already have I'm really heavy on Tim Hardaway Jr. right now. You already have Jamal Murray, so I don't think there'll be a lot of slates where it's just like, oh, I'm just going to play McConnell in every lineup. Here, I don't know that it will be that level of priority, but if he's starting, I would expect he's playing at least upper 20s in minutes. He's a 0.86 DraftKings point per minute guy so far this year. Normally, he's a bit better than that. Only a 38.9% true shooting percentage so far this year. That is certainly going to come up. Really good at getting steals. So another guy that you get the volatility of those defensive stats. So if he's starting, I think he's going to look really good.
Agreed. Yeah, I think he would be one of the top plays for sure. And then how would it affect Mathurin? I know it seems like Indiana likes to bring him off the bench pretty much regardless of who's in, who's out. So does that cap his upside a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think he would still come off the bench. I think it increases the chances of him being in the closing lineup. He's averaged 28 minutes per game so far this year, but sometimes you're getting those 24-minute games. Other times you're getting 30. He's been productive when he's out there, averaging 1.04 DraftKings points per minute. But I just think if you take Halliburton out, there's a greater chance that Mathurin ends up in that closing lineup, particularly if the game's competitive or they're playing from behind. Because without Halliburton, you need more offensive firepower. It's a lot easier to say, all right, we're going to run Mathurin out there in place of the Nembhard / Naismith pairing. Whereas if Halliburton's out there, a lot of times you don't really need Mathurin's usage because you'd rather Halliburton have the ball in his hands.
Definitely. All right. On the Hornets side, it looks like Dennis Smith continues to be doubtful for this one. Aside from that, no real injury notes other than Gordon Hayward continuing to be out. LaMelo, he came back 2 games ago, and I think last game he got into foul trouble. He's always a little bit of a foul risk for a guard, so it does make him pretty volatile, but he's only 9K on 8,900 on DK, 8,300 on FanDuel. So how does he fit in on this slate?
Yeah, I think he's one of the better mid-range guard options. You mentioned the foul trouble, and it's just really interesting because from a health perspective, I don't think he has any sort of a minutes limit. He was in foul trouble in his first game, played 28 minutes, pretty clearly was going to play more. Last game, he was in some early foul trouble, still got the 34 minutes. If you look back at last year, though, he only averaged 32 minutes per start because the guy is just constantly in foul trouble, especially for a guard, like you said. So it keeps me from going too crazy on his minutes projection, but I do think expecting 33 minutes, give or take, is very reasonable. And this is a good point per minute guy in a good matchup at a very reasonable price tag. So, he's another guy that I'm expecting to get 15 to 20% of, and I'm just happy with that. It's somebody that I think I'd be prioritizing a little bit more on other slates. But again, it's just difficult to pay that salary when I can get Dinwiddie, when I can get Murray for a lot cheaper. But he's certainly somebody that I want to be mixing into lineups, and he has a massive ceiling here.
Definitely, yeah. And it's pretty easy to afford him. He's not popping up as a great value, but certainly a reasonable play tonight. And then Rozier, like he's been a guy that I've been kind of targeting in fantasy. It hasn't really worked out very much, but he's been getting a lot of minutes. Like his stats this year, it indicates that he should be a pretty good fantasy player. Like, what have you noticed with Rozier?
Yeah, I mean, he takes a little bit of a hit with LaMelo back, but still, they've played 72 games since the start of last season where Gordon Hayward's been out and LaMelo and Rozier have been in. Rozier's averaged 34 minutes per game and a little over a fantasy point per minute. I think that you can add an extra minute or two to that to the minute per game projection here, especially because Charlotte actually tightened their rotation last game, which was nice to see. I don't know if they'll stick with that, but they basically kicked Booknight out of the rotation. They played Teo Maledon for like 24 minutes. I know I just saw somebody mention him in chat that he was an interesting play. Interesting, I think, is a fair word there, just because like if he plays 24 minutes again at 3,300, he probably is a good value. But on this particular slate, the issue you're running into with him is that first you have to get those minutes, and then you still need him to beat like all these other good value options. But as far as Rozier goes, I think he's another guy that you can just use to differentiate. He's going to project from mid 30s in fantasy points, but he's also just going to have those games where he does really well. I didn't get a lot of him in the crunch I did before the show, but I think that's a lot more to do with just there being an abundance of options, and he kind of just didn't filter to the top all that much. It wouldn't surprise me if I got more by the time we get to lock, because I do think he's a pretty solid play.
Nice, definitely someone that could fly under the radar. The other guys, they don't bad, but on Slate with a ton of value, no one's really popping up. What do you think?
Yeah, like I said, I like the playing time that we've seen from them recently. Mason Plumlee's playing time's been trending up. PJ Washington's coming off of another game where he played 36 minutes. The problem just becomes like there are such good plays on this slate that it's tough to prioritize those. PJ Washington, for example, same position, same price range as Kevin Love without Jared Allen. Clearly, Kevin Love's going to be the guy that people go to first. So it kind of just relegates Washington to being another guy where he's showing up in like 5 to 10% of my lineups, and I'm perfectly fine with that. But it's just tough to think I'm going to get more.
Nice. All right, Minnesota at Orlando. On the Minnesota side, no injuries to speak of, so in a 10-game slate, this one may not be the one that is really gonna stand out. But what have you made so far of that Towns Gobert huge front court?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really been great for anybody. The spacing sucks. You're not getting the version of Anthony Edwards that we wanted. But I do think from a DFS standpoint, this team's actually pretty interesting at their current price tags, because you have a good matchup here against Orlando. You have about a 115 implied total for the Wolves. And the prices are really fair. I mean, you're getting a $9,100 salary on Karl Anthony Towns, $7K for Rudy Gobert, who's averaging about 1.1 DraftKings points per minute in 32 to 33 minutes per game this year. Edwards sitting at 7,500. Russell fairly priced as well at 6,200. He's only averaged about 30 minutes per game, but he did play several more minutes in their most recent games. So, that's at least some reason for optimism. All four of those guys are actually showing up a pretty decent amount for me, just again in that context of relatively low owned guys that help me make a lineup contrarian. There's not one particular guy that I'm just jamming in, but right now we have Gobert on DraftKings projected for 8% ownership. If the slate started right now, I'd have like 14%. I'd have like 10% Russell. We have him projected for 5. I think I'm around 10% on Towns. We have him projected for 7. So that's just kind of how this team is shaking out for me, where I do think that there's a good chance one of these guys has a big game here. It's difficult to pinpoint which one it's going to be, because from a median standpoint, they all sort of project just marginally good. But in a 1-game sample, there's a pretty good chance that it is, the Gobert game or the Edwards game or whatever it may be.
Yeah, definitely. Like, that's always what we're looking for as far as those like 1 or 2 sleepers in a lineup. So I think Russell, Edwards, Towns, and Gobert all fit the bill to some extent. So certainly no one I'm going to avoid. On the Orlando side of this one, we got Wendell Carter Jr. questionable. They're like pretty forthcoming with their starting lineup, so I wouldn't be surprised if we get that sooner rather than later. But okay, so Banchero remains out. Okiki's been getting the start. Has that really like elevated anyone else to be a fantasy option tonight? Or have all the prices adjusted because he's
Yeah, I mean, the prices have adjusted. You do get bumps in rates. The problem partially though is that like these guys aren't that good. So for example, Franz Wagner, 29% usage rate, 26.5% assist percentage without Banchero on the floor, still only averaging 1 fantasy point per minute. Wendell Carter Jr. is at 1.17. I think he looks good if he plays, but he did miss shoot around today. He is questionable for this game, so who knows. Okiki's been playing around 32 minutes per game, but he's only averaging 3/4 of a fantasy point per minute without Banchero, and his salary's come up. Mo Bamba is an interesting one to keep an eye on because he had kind of been phased out of their rotation. But then ever since Banchero went down, you've been seeing Bamba get pretty substantial minutes as the backup center. If Carter were to miss this game, I think it would end up making Bamba at 4,400 look really good. He's averaged over a fantasy point per minute without Banchero.
Yeah, he definitely seems like someone that especially if Wendell Carter is out. Like Amba, like he's a killer fantasy producer when he's on the court. It's just like seems like the playing time it's been there with Boncaro out, but before that, like in and out of the rotation. So um definitely a guy who's better at fantasy than real life basketball.
Yeah.
That's always uncomfortable
Yeah.
in your DFS lineups.
I think if Carter is in, Bomba's a really interesting large field tournament play because the way, with how much value there is on this slate, and the fact that outside of Giannis, there's not really anything that we care about paying up for, and at the very top since Jokic and Luka are out. So when you think about the center position today, like ownership's going to go to a very cheap Dwayne Dedman, and it should, and ownership's going to go to, I assume, DeAndre Jordan if he's starting for Denver, Najee otherwise, but that you're going to get like ownership funneled to those guys for cheap. Paying an extra $1,000 or so to get to Mo Bamba, who does have a similar minutes projection to those guys, I don't think really changes the like upside or projection of your lineup that much, because that $1,000 just doesn't really matter a ton when you have all these other underpriced players. So that is kind of a spot where if Carter is in, I think Bamba's like a really sneaky option that's only getting 3% ownership, but that I think has a very similar range of outcomes to your Dedman and DeAndre Jordan type guys. And then if Carter is out, Bamba becomes more of a priority. His ownership certainly goes up, but you can also just feel a lot more comfortable in him if he's starting.
Definitely. All right, thanks Aiden for the super chat. He says Jimmy Butler seems to be underowned with basically all the usage he can handle going his way tonight, right? So he's referring to Bam Adebayo being out tonight. So Bam gets a ton of ball handling as compared to most centers. So those seem like it should be a pretty big boon to Jimmy Butler's production.
Yeah, he
He
should get a ton of work here because no Tyler Hero as well, which already is a benefit for him. For what it's worth, he has played 81 minutes this year without either one of Bam or Hero on the floor. He somehow only has a 22.9% usage rate, but part of the reason for that is that he has a 44% assist percentage. Typically, especially when you're dealing with like these smaller sample sizes with guys on and off the floor, if you see something like that where it's just a lower usage rate than you would expect, but a massive assist percentage, you're likely to see the assist percentage come down, the usage rate come up, and basically he just ends up being a really productive player in one way or the other. He has averaged 1.5 fantasy points per minute in those minutes.
Nice. Yeah, he looks like a great play. I'd say like we can't expect him to be underowned. He's on our board here. He's about like the 10th highest ranked player. So I think he's gonna be popular, but certainly a great option tonight. All right, guys. So we got a deal with BetMGM if you're in a legal sports betting state here. And you can, if you're not a MGM customer, you can get 2 months free of our Stokastic Plus Platinum package and their deal of $1,000 risk-free bet on top of that. So like we value that risk-free bet depending, like we actually have a tool on the site to help you pick the right bet in NBA. If you pick the right bet, this risk-free bet can be worth like $600 or $700. So it's like huge value. Then you get the 2 free months of Stokastic Plus Platinum. That's a few $100. So like if you're not already an MGM customer, this is like a crazy good deal. What you have to do, create a if you don't have a Stochastic membership account already, create a free membership using the form below, which is in the description, or just log in. And then, oh, sorry, I guess so, like you might have to go to the MGM page on our menu. All right, click the big MGM button that appears after registering or logging in. Then complete the steps with MGM. You gotta deposit $10, make a paid bet, and then your bet has to settle, like it has to finish by so you can qualify for the subscription. And then you just have to you'll receive an email from MGM for instructions on how to get the 2 free months. So make sure to take advantage of this deal. If you add up all the money, like you're getting $1,000 value for free, like for your deposit. So pretty killer return on your stake there. So definitely recommend it. All right, let's move on to Boston at Atlanta. Should be a pretty good game here. 1 point spread on the Boston side. You have Marcus Smart out, Malcolm Brogdon is out, so a lot of like distributors and like point guard minutes available. So I think this is a pretty big bump to to some guys on the team. So who's your first target on the Celtics?
Derek White was the first one that stood out as far as I think just getting a bump with everybody out. $4,900 price tag for him. I'm expecting that he'll start in place of Marcus Smart, probably play around 34 minutes. He's a .82 DraftKings point per minute guy this year, so I think he looks pretty good. Peyton Pritchard is, I think, a really big question mark to me. Right now, we have him getting 25% ownership. I think in the crunch I did earlier, I was probably a little bit too low on him. I don't think it's a given that he plays huge minutes here. Like, I think you could very easily see like 20 to 22 minutes, and that given all of the good plays on this slate, if he goes and gets 20 to 22 fantasy points, it doesn't really help too much. But there is a path to him getting more. Like, when you project out Boston's rotation, you kind of get to a point where you're at the level that you're comfortable with everybody's minutes, and there's like 6 to 8 minutes left to go around. And so it kind of becomes like, all right, do they just give more minutes to Peyton Pritchard and Sam Hauser, or do they put, Justin Jackson or Blake Griffin into the rotation for like a stint? And I don't really know the answer to that. So it's a situation where I'm not comfortable with the 25% ownership going to Pritchard, but I'm also not comfortable if I don't play Pritchard, because if this guy goes and plays 24 to 26 minutes at 3,400, he's going to be a really, really good play.
Definitely. So I think whenever you have an instance like this where there's a lot of volatility in the play, like that is not a bad I guess it's like it works in your favor if they have low ownership, and works against you if they have very high ownership. So Pritchard, he's kind of in the middle at 25%, so pretty solid play. Might depend on what other injury news comes up before lock, how much we want to go to him. But if you have $3,400 left, like, he's going to be one of the guys that really pops. So I think you're right. There is some fragility in the projection here, where it's hard to have a ton of confidence one way or the other, because haven't been any games where Smart has missed this year so far. But um, certainly a good option. And then
So he's played 29 minutes alongside Derek White this year, for whatever that's worth. That's the fewest on the team. But it is still 29 minutes, so like they've at least done it. Doesn't really. I was hoping it would literally be just like zero or a lot, and I would kind of have an answer to this. Still didn't really help me with what I'm stuck on.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't played that many minutes this year in general, though.
Right.
So like, he's only been in the rotation about 4 games. And aside from just coming in garbage time and stuff. So
Right. Yeah, like they clearly haven't been actively avoiding it.
right, exactly. So I think you're right. It's going to depend on, like, maybe one of these bench players gets hot and then they stay out there more. You never can really predict it. But um as far as the other guys, I mean, Tatum and Jaylen Brown could see a boost to their production, since they're gonna have to do more of the ball handling. How are you like handling them tonight? Because Tatum's price, man, this is like the highest I've ever seen him. 10.9K on DK, 10.6 on FanDuel.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised I'm not getting more right now. I think it might just be that they are all relatively popular, because I don't have a lot of Boston in general, and that scares me because this is a pretty appealing game. Jaylen Brown, somebody I'm typically over the field on, especially at the $8,700 price tag. He's averaging 36 and a half minutes per game. He's averaging over 1.1 DraftKings points per minute. I don't have a ton of him right now. Same goes for Tatum. Certainly an expensive price tag there. Also averaging 37 and a half minutes per game and like 1.3 fantasy points per minute this year, I believe. 1.4 fantasy points per minute this year. So I think he deserves that price tag. It's just I'm having an easier time getting to a lot of these mid-range guys that I think are underpriced. That is one thing that tends to happen. I think whenever you get a slate with a lot of value, there's a tendency to just immediately say like, oh, well, you're just going to play the cheap guys, and then you're going to, just jam in Giannis everywhere. But on a slate like this, you have cheap value, but then you also have these really good mid-range guys, whether that's, Jamal Murray, who's, super talented and has a really high ceiling, or Dinwiddie, or, others. DeAndre Ayton is free for whatever reason. Like, there's just a lot of guys in that price range where you can make very, very high upside lineups even without paying 11K for Jason Tatum.
Definitely. Yeah, 11K seems to like take a lot of the upside out of Tatum, but it's still honestly, where Luka and Jokic have been ruled out, like, that is a pretty reasonable way to spend the salary. On the Atlanta side, no injuries to speak of, so for tournaments? Like maybe not any like go-to players, but what kind of value are you seeing on Atlanta tonight?
Yeah, not much here. I mean,
Mhm.
Trey Young is, I think, my highest owned guy from Atlanta at the moment. Just he's Trey Young. He falls into some lineups. I talked about John Collins this morning. He's getting to the point. He has a price tag where like you look at it and it's just like I'm gonna feel really dumb if John Collins has a massive game at very low ownership at 5,700 and I'm not there. But then you look at what John Collins has done this year, and he's really done nothing to warrant being more expensive than he is right now. He has a usage rate that's 5 points lower than DeAndre Hunter. He's averaging 31 or 32 minutes per game. He's got about a 12% rebounding percentage, which is fine, but it's not what you really want from him because he's not getting any minutes at the five. So, will he start having games where maybe he shoots more and that 16% usage rate comes up? It's possible, but there's nothing to suggest it's happening. So, even though it's a price point where you look at John Collins' name and you're like, man, that's really low. It's pretty much correct.
Yeah, definitely. So he's hasn't been the greatest fantasy player, yeah, for sure. So I think that barring any additional updates, not a ton here. So Capella maybe on FanDuel is a little cheap at 6,200, especially because their reward blocks a little bit more, but they're guys that you can kind of mix in, but not really anyone that stands out as a great play. Miami versus Toronto. Hero and Bam are out, as we previously mentioned. Dwayne Dedman is questionable, which is pretty significant because if he's out, I think they just announced Yurt 7 is out for a long time
Yeah,
too.
he
So
just had surgery like yesterday or today.
yeah, so if Dedman's out, like they're not gonna have any centers really. I mean, they got Nikola Jovic, who he got suspended in the early season and hasn't really played since then, I think. So not really I can't remember exactly what happened there, but what do you think is gonna happen with Bam out of the lineup here?
They're really thin in the front court. They do have a two-way guy who is not listed on their injury report. That's a center, so I'm assuming that he is active. He's not on DraftKings. I blanking on his name. I know it's Robinson, Orlando Robinson. So they do have a center that I think is with the team right now. My expectation is that if Dedman plays, he's going to start and probably play as much as he can. I don't know what the answer to that is. Last year, he averaged about 24 minutes per game in his starts, but last year you also had Yurtseven that was, stealing minutes and basically splitting those minutes with him. I would think that Miami would love for Dedman to just go out there and play 30. I don't know if he can. He hasn't played more than 16 or 18 minutes so far this year. I think expecting like 24 to 26 minutes from him is reasonable. And at that price tag, he's basically a point per minute guy. He's going to project pretty well. Behind him, I expect that you get Jovic in the rotation. He's 6'10". He's also 205 pounds, but you're facing a Toronto team that just runs those guys constantly at center. So it shouldn't be too much of an issue. Jovic is 3K flat. I don't really think I get to him here, but it is at least somebody where it's like if he ends up being a guy that you need, it wouldn't be the most surprising thing. But I'm expecting you get those guys playing the bulk of the center minutes, and then Orlando Robinson, if he is with the team, soaks up the rest.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think that it's something we'll have to keep an eye on if Dedman is out. Maybe like the starting lineup will be very telling, I think, but uh it'll be interesting to see what they do here. Jovic could be a guy that comes from zero to hero, basically.
Yeah.
So that'll be a name to keep an eye out for. Of
Yeah, to
course, we
answer Ryan Houston's question in chat, if Dedman's out, I assume I'm playing Jovic. Like, I haven't projected that rotation with him out, so I'm not positive, but you kind of just run out of minutes. If they started, like, it would still depend on the starting lineup, but assuming they don't just run out a starting lineup with, like, Jimmy Butler at center, then I would assume Jovic is playing a lot of minutes if Dedman is out.
right. All right. So that'll be one of the sneaky injuries to keep an eye on because obviously if Dedman's out on a normal day, not really a big deal, but this is a pretty big exception. So um all right, so Toronto at center though, they're running Thaddeus Young has been starting. So this is a guy that's not really a big. He's played power forward most of his career. So I guess you're right that like they could probably get by with some smaller lineups, like even Jimmy Butler at center, as crazy as it sounds. So This is gonna be a weird one. So obviously Butler's high on our list of players tonight with Bam out. And then what else are you doing with the Heat?
Yeah, so Butler looks really good. You know, we talked about his rates already. He is getting ownership, but 9K power forward, he's going to look good. You could certainly see an extra minute or two from him as well, just because they are so shorthanded right now. Beyond that and Dedmon, I think those are likely to be my two highest owned guys. Caleb Martin, Kyle Lowry, Max Strus, they've all sort of seen their prices adjust a bit. Martin pulling 7% ownership at 4,600. There's just other guys in that price range I'm going to be getting to first. Same goes for Lowry at 6,900 and Strus at 5,900. So I think it's Dedmon and Butler for me primarily. If the slate started right now, I would be under on both of them, but you know, still getting there. They're just getting a ton of ownership right now. Jovic, if you just really wanted to gamble on a completely unowned min salary guy, but I have a few of those that I'm already gambling on, so uh, don't have Jovic at the moment.
That is fair. So, on the Toronto side, a team that has really been mixing it up, with their players going in and out. But today, Van Vliet and Gary Trent are questionable, so if they return to the lineup, that's going to take a lot of the interest out of guys like Banton. But supposing one or both of them are out, what would you do with the Toronto team here?
So if they're both out, Toronto still looks interesting. You know, you're getting Banton at 5,100. He's basically a point per minute guy. Played around 25 minutes last game. Did have a shortened rotation in the third quarter after he picked up his fourth foul. So if he plays well, I think you could conceivably see 28 to 30 minutes from him. But there is still volatility there because if he doesn't play well, you do have Malachi Flynn that can take minutes. You have other ways the rotation can go. Scotty Barnes runs the point, and Nick Nurse just plays another 6'9" guy. He has no issue doing that. So there is still volatility, and that price tag coming up makes him riskier, but there is still pretty clearly a ceiling there as well. Boucher's minutes look more secure the more minutes or the more guys that are out. He played about 31 minutes last game. He's 6K now. If Van Vliet and Trent were both in, you're probably getting like 26 to 28 minutes from Boucher. Makes it pretty tough to want to get there. But if you take them both out and you can kind of give him those 30 minutes, he's going to look a little bit better. Thad Young at 4,800, probably playing playing upper 20s probably, especially if those guys are both out. But at 4,800, I think on this slate still kind of just looks like a secondary option.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this one's gonna be tough. Like if we don't have any injury news, are you gonna like pencil in any guys from Toronto, or would you like potentially late swap to get them, or is it just not a situation where like Banton's price has gone up crazy? It's 5,100 on DK. Like I don't think I would play him if he's starting just because it's like that was such a flash in the pan that he had that game. It almost reminded me of a like last day of the NBA season type of game where it's just like some guy comes out of nowhere to have 50 fantasy points, but
Yeah.
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
if he starts, I would late swap to some of him probably because like he's still only 5,100. He is a point per minute guy. Overall this year he's at 1.18, but if you go back to last year and like you take Trent and Van Vliet off, he's 1.03, I think. So like the minutes are volatile, but I do think he's a good fantasy producer when he's on the floor. I wouldn't be jamming him in over Dinwiddie or Hardaway or those guys. But if we do get that news, I mean, it's a 7:30 game, so hopefully we just have it before lock. But if we did get news that Van Vliet and Trent are out, I would late swap to get the at least some Banton and Boucher.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, Boucher he's interesting because he's always coming off the bench, but it does have a huge minutes upside, as we've been seeing. So guys, no house advantage. It's I mean it's the best place you can put money in DFS, no doubt, because their contests are overlaying every single night. You're putting in, a dollar and on average getting back $1.20 or so because of all the overlay. And they also have really cool like first the house part of the site where it's kind of like other sites like Prize Picks and Underdog where you can make prop parlays and win some nice funds. On the Stochastic site, we got no house advantage projections, our no house advantage optimal lineups for free, and they also have a $50 free deposit match so that you get, I mean, it's like you're getting a bonus plus they have the best contest in the industry as far as the money you're going to get back. So this is really a no-brainer. Let's take a look at their contest tonight real quick, just the overlay check where um I've been finding that if they have a contest, like tonight's contest is 1,200 entries. A lot of times you'll see something like this go to like maybe 800 or even less than that, where on DraftKings, they've already filled out up like 2/3 of their contests. On No House Advantage, they've only filled up 225 out of 1,200. So that's about 20%. So like this is really a great option for you. And make sure to take advantage of that bonus if you're not already a No House Advantage customer. All right. Cleveland at Milwaukee. You have Jared Allen out, so that's going to make it interesting. What do you expect them to do with the center position tonight?
So we got Kevin Love starting in Allen's place last game. Donovan Mitchell was also out in that game, and Lamar Stevens started. My expectation is that Love starts. There are other routes they could go. They decide to just give Robin Lopez the start. They decide to start Mobley at the 5. Like, there's other ways they can attack this, but I think it makes sense for them to go Love and Mobley in the front court. Like, you're going up against a front court that has Giannis and Brook Lopez. So to me, it makes sense. I think that's the route they'll go. Love played about 28 minutes last game. He averaged about 28 minutes per game in his starts last season. I expect around 28 minutes here. He's a really good fantasy producer. He's around a 1.2 fantasy point per minute guy. To me, he's just one of the best plays on the slate, assuming he starts.
Kevin Love, nice. Yeah, he's still got a lot of fantasy upside. We've been seeing it in games where he doesn't start, that he comes off the bench and puts up a 40 spot. He's only 5,600 tonight, so I have to agree that it seems like if he gets to start tonight, that's going to be a great sign for his fantasy value. And then with the matchup, let's see, he'd be going up against Brook Lopez, so I don't really feel like that's a difficult matchup. Brook Lopez mostly, plays in the perimeter and stuff. So, yeah, I think this is a pretty appealing spot for Kevin Love. How does he stack up among other mid-range plays tonight for you?
Yeah, he's one of my favorites. If the slate started right now, he would be my like 6th highest owned guy on DraftKings, which I am perfectly fine with. And the nice thing about him too, because I saw somebody in chat ask if like his usage goes down if he's playing with the starters, which is certainly a reasonable question. But for one, he's played 138 minutes with Donovan Mitchell on the floor this year. He still has a 20.7% usage rate compared to like 22% overall. But the other thing is that he's a capable passer and he's a really good rebounder. He has about a 20.5% rebounding percentage overall this year, 22.2% in those minutes that he's played with Mitchell. He has about a 16.5% assist percentage this year as well. So he's not just scoring dependent. He kind of just does it, across the board. And it's always really nice to be able to get to excellent rebounders like that.
Definitely. So, one, I just saw this. I think this is silly, but do you think they would maybe start Robin Lopez because Brook Lopez is on the other side?
It's not the craziest narrative, I guess.
Yeah, that's something hopefully we know. And we can swap accordingly. But Kevin Love, if he does get another start, that'd be great. And as far as the rest of the team, what kind of impacts do you see Jared Allen's absence having?
So it mostly, for now, I'm assuming Mitchell plays since he did go through shoot around. And if that's the case, I think Allen's absence is basically just bumping Kevin Love. Jared Allen's not a particularly high usage guy. His main, the main thing that he affects is playing time at center and rebounding. Kevin Love will soak up a lot of that, assuming he starts. If Robin Lopez is coming off the bench, I'm not messing around with him at 3K on this slate, I don't think. But if he starts, you can throw him into that like DeAndre Jordan conversation. But I don't think Allen should have much of an impact on anything else. Like, you're going to get some rotation minutes from Cedi Osman and Okoro and Lamar Stevens most likely, especially because Wade is also doubtful. But none of those guys are likely to be cracking my lineups on a 10-game slate with a ton of value.
Nice. On cue, Anthony, thank you for the super chat. Best power forward options 5,500 to 6,500 on DK. I mean, I think it seems like Kevin Love is one of those. Are there any other power forwards on DK between 55 and 6,500 that you're
double checking
in?
Christian Wood's salary?
Yeah,
6,400 on Christian Wood. Yeah, so like looking at if the slate started right now, Christian Wood would be my highest owned guy with power forward eligibility. Kevin Love would be my second highest.
Aaron Gordon also is in this range, and
Yep.
with no Jokic, that stands out. All right, so we got the news that Gary Trent is doubtful. Let's circle back to Toronto real quick. So with Trent doubtful, we saw that it's tough because okay, Banton's probably not going to start because you got Van Vliet potentially coming back. And who do you think gets the bump here?
If Van Vliet is back, we should get a starting lineup of Van Vliet, Barnes, Anunoby, Young. I guess Hernan Gomez. He started in place of Otto Porter last game, or started the second half in place of Otto Porter. If Van Vliet's out, then I would assume we're getting Banton, Barnes, Anunoby, Hernan Gomez, Young.
If Hernan Gomez starts, does that mean Boucher is gonna get in the game earlier and potentially play more minutes?
Maybe. Like I think it still depends on Van Vliet.
Okay. All right. So I'm trying to go through the minutes here and update them. It's so do you like Hernan Gomez, he didn't play a ton last game. Is he a DFS play that you'd consider now?
Yeah, if he's starting, especially. So he started the second half after Otto Porter was injured. He played around 12 and a half minutes in the second half. He is 3,100 on DraftKings. So, I mean, if he's going to play 25, 26 minutes, it's pretty easy to see how he could get there. He also has small forward, power forward eligibility. So that's kind of nice because, you have a lot of guards that you really like today. You have a lot of cheap centers. It's going to open the door for some flexibility, in your roster construction if you want to pay down at those positions instead. So if he's starting, I do think he looks pretty reasonable. And then, again, just if Van Vliet is out, all of this stuff just looks better because there's not Fred Van Vliet soaking up 37 minutes.
Nice. The other news, Beal won't have a minutes limit Wednesday, but his conditioning will be monitored. And to me, that says, like it's his first game back for a while, so maybe he's gonna play like a handful of minutes less, but like he's probably not a great DFS option to begin with. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much just projecting his normal minutes. Whenever they go with monitored, I assume it means they're asking the athlete if they want to come out of the game or not. And more times than not, they're just going to play their normal stuff. So, yeah, like Beal averages 36 minutes per game this year. I think going somewhere like 34, 35 makes sense.
Okay. All right.
They
So
also did this was something I just remembered from when we had all the COVID stuff. The trend back then, and I obviously have no idea if it's going to apply here. The trend back when we always had these guys coming back from COVID was if they got out of protocols and then just came back, a lot of times they ended up being limited. If they got out of protocols and then still missed a game or two so that they could get back in shape, they typically weren't limited. Beal's been out and just getting back in shape. So I think it's likely he just plays his normal minutes, assuming he doesn't, just stop being able to breathe on the floor or something.
all right, yeah, that's good to hear. I don't really think he's priced great in DFS anyway, so I'm not too stuck on this. Let's go to Cleveland and Milwaukee again. On the Milwaukee side, we have Drew Holiday questionable. So it seemed like yes, or last game, I think Drew Holiday was out and Giannis just completely like was pretty disappointing. So it does seem to me though that if Drew is out, that does benefit Giannis. What would you expect?
I mean, it definitely shouldn't hurt him. The issue that you kind of run into with guys like Giannis is like, yeah, Drew should, in theory, make him a little bit better. You're taking a high usage guy off the floor, but at the same time, Giannis already has a 40% usage rate and a 32% assist percentage this year. Like, how much more can he really do? And then it also is potentially offset by even more, defensive attention on him. Again, not that he's really somebody who can defend when he's playing well, but it kind of like you run into that with Luka too sometimes, where it's just like, oh, Spencer Dinwiddie's not playing. Cool, but also who cares? Like Luka's already taking every possession. So one way or the other, I think Giannis projects as the highest scorer on the slate. I do think it's pretty site dependent, like how easy it is to get to him. Right now on DraftKings, even with all the value, I'm just not getting there because I'm just my lineups are just grading out better living in the mid range and the upper, the 9K guys, than just jamming in Giannis. On Yahoo, I do think it's easier to get there. It's probably easier to get there on FanDuel as well.
Nice. Yeah, I think Giannis, like it's interesting because Chris Paul's unlikely to play today. Or wait, yeah, today's Wednesday. Okay.
Good. We needed more guards in that price.
He's been out a while, so like I don't expect this to be like a slate breaker. But okay, with Giannis, he's just so expensive. Like he's a really only an option because of how much value on today's slate there is. And I have to agree that probably not gonna be even close to optimal. So like it's really, are there better spots to put your money? So even I don't love Jason Tatum at 10 point. I think he's 10.9K on DK, but it's like compared to 12.6K, that's not bad. So like I haven't built any lineups yet, but I think that it should be really easy to get to these top guys. It's just like, do you want to really to overspend on them?
So, like, kind of the issue that you run into. So, I just looked to see what the couple of Giannis lineups I do have built look like, and they're good lineups. But when you look at it, like it has Caleb Martin and Bruce Brown Jr. Like, I like Bruce Brown Jr. I think Caleb Martin's fine, but if you just take like Caleb Martin 4,600 and Giannis 12,600, so you're talking about what 16 to $17,000 between the two. I think I'd rather do something like, I don't know, Jaylen Brown and another 8K guy as opposed to, Caleb Martin. I'm just going to end up preferring lineups that look like that, I think. The way I've been thinking about these pay up guys on DraftKings specifically with how they've priced them is, yeah, they're the highest projected guys on the slate, but you're at the price point where you probably need them, especially on these larger slates where there are so many mid-range guys. Like there's just going to be guys that score 50, 60 DraftKings points today that cost a lot less than Giannis. So it used to be when he was 11K or 11.5, if he just hits his 60 whatever point projection, that's very likely to be in a winning lineup. Here, it's very likely to be matched by a bunch of dudes that are $3,000 less expensive. So you're in a situation where, yeah, he can go get 80, but he's just as likely to get 80 as Trae Young is to get like 60 or 65. So it doesn't really give him that much of an advantage when you're pairing him with guys like, Caleb Martin or whoever that kind of suck compared to other options.
Definitely. All right, let's go to Chicago at New Orleans. Chicago, probably not the most interesting team. The only guy out is Kobe White, not really a significant one. So, as a result, I mean, I think some of these guys are in play, but definitely not standout plays. Is there anyone that you're specifically looking at
from Chicago?
Yeah.
No, it's another tournament team, I think. I do think Andre Drummond is a really interesting Dwayne Dedmon / DeAndre Jordan pivot. Like he projects for 16 or 17 minutes, but if anything happens to Vooch, you're getting more minutes. And Andre Drummond's $3,900. Like this is a really good point per minute guy. He's likely to give you a good enough, a decent score at 3,900 even in his projected minutes. But if anything goes wrong with Vooch, this guy can pretty easily win you a tournament at low ownership. Like it's just not hard to envision him beating guys like Dwayne Dedmon and DeAndre Jordan are a lot more popular. So I like him as a tournament differentiation play. I'm somewhat interested in the Zach LaVine and Vucevic price tags, 7,400 for LaVine, 7,300 for Vooch. Certainly not difficult to picture how they just give you good games there. But at the same time, we've already talked about Kevin Love that has center eligibility and is 5,600. We've already alluded to Christian Wood. I mentioned DeAndre Ayton being really cheap. So still not guys I'm prioritizing, but I do think they're a little bit underpriced.
Nice. All right. On the New Orleans side, we got Zion Williamson out. He missed the last game too, so nothing new. But do you see any value coming out of New Orleans as a result?
Yeah. And right now it's not getting much ownership, so that's actually kind of interesting. Trey Murphy's 4,400, not getting any ownership. He only played 25 minutes yesterday, but he didn't play in the fourth quarter. You could easily get 30, 32 minutes from Murphy. I don't think he's a priority, but he is somebody that you can, kind of mix in. Larry Nance is the guy that I'm expecting to just absolutely piss me off again tonight. He was 12% owned on yesterday's slate at 4,700 because people just thought he was going to play minutes alongside Joval, even though he never does that. He didn't. Joval just happened to play 14 minutes, so Nance played 31, had a really, really good game at 4,700. Now he's $500 less expensive on DraftKings. I think he's a good play simply because he averages 24 minutes per game and he's $4,200 with power forward eligibility. We have him projected for 11% ownership. I wouldn't be surprised if it's even higher than that, just because now you're going to get like confirmation bias that everybody was right with Zion out and they're going to play him again. So I am a little concerned about the ownership there. I think he's a perfectly reasonable value. I'm not really getting to him just because there's plenty of that. And I think there's a lot of very similar plays to Larry Nance.
Yeah, that's fair. So, they didn't play on the court at all alongside each other last game, I take it?
No, they've played 5 total minutes this year and none of them were last night.
Okay, that makes sense. It did seem like last year they didn't like shy away from playing them together though. So
yeah, like they can, they just haven't. Like Larry Nance
yeah.
can play multiple positions, but they haven't been. They have been closing pretty much every game with Larry Nance over Joval. So like if they were to start playing alongside each other, we're gonna get Larry Nance looking really good and Joval looking really good because it would mean more minutes for both. But they've very, very firmly this year just not done that. And when Zion is out, you're just getting more minutes for Trey Murphy. You're getting more minutes for Najee Marshall. They put Dyson Daniels in the rotation yesterday. So, obviously it could change. Like we saw it change yesterday with the Nets where Ben Simmons immediately subs in next to Nick Claxton. But, there's absolutely nothing that's happened this season that suggests that you should be expecting it to happen tonight.
Definitely. All right, thanks, Jeff, for the super chat. He says, MME portfolio, do you blindly trust your projections or do you make manual adjustments that you see fit for lower owned players in game theory? So this is a great question. I'll throw it to you first, and then I got some interesting thoughts here.
So I wouldn't say I blindly trust my projections. I try and see what I'm getting, and so I can at least like double check my projections and assumptions. If I'm just getting some random dude 60% of the time and it's like, oh well, I could have just projected him a minute less, like I'm gonna adjust that. But at the same time, I'm not gonna, if I have somebody that I just think is the best play and I'm confident in my assumptions, I'm not gonna shy away from it because like other people disagree with me or because like I'm scared of losing money on that slate because I'm probably gonna lose I'm a huge favorite to lose every slate that I play no matter what I do. So it kind of depends on the exact situation there. I don't need to make manual adjustments as far as lower owned players or game theory go, just because I've already built a process where I naturally get to those guys across my lineup. So it's not like I have to go in and tweak it too much.
Nice. Yeah, trusting your projections is never a bad idea, like especially if you're using the stochastic projections. So like the thing is like the projections at the start of the night aren't necessarily the projections at the end of the night. So that's where like shows like this come in where me and Adam are breaking down like what are our assumptions now and how could those change throughout the night? Like if guys are in or out, you get a starting lineup you don't expect or something. So like one instance was Josh Richardson the other night where everyone thought he was starting an Island game like at 9 p.m. Like my lineups, I had him locked in and there was no real like great swaps because there was only one game where like in retrospect what I should have done is discounted his projection a little bit just to account for like it was the most optimal or optimistic projection and we weren't sure like he was going to start for sure, but that was kind of what we were assuming. So it's like being able to see those situations in advance is like the highest level of DFS. So tonight it's a little bit trickier because I don't know if there's a ton of late game news that is yet to break. I mean, we got some big injuries we're going to talk about, so we'll be sure to point out situations where you could possibly get a game theory edge here. All right.
As far as blindly trusting projections too, I think what I was talking about with Peyton Pritchard is like a perfect example of that for me. The crunch that I did before the show, I would have literally 0 Peyton Pritchard, and that's like a really aggressive stand on this slate. If I was just like, if this was like the Larry Nance spot where I'm just like, I know they're not going to play him next to Derek White, I would be like, cool, like I'm cool, I like that. But because I really think he could play anywhere from 20 to 26 minutes, and I got 0 at 21 minutes, there's no reason for me not to just throw a couple more minutes to him so I can at least get some Peyton Pritchard, because that's not a spot where I'm confident in my assumption at all.
Right. That's a good point. So, um, yeah, that's always the tricky part is like projections are like a best guess and like they don't necessarily incorporate like the confidence level in that guess. So, okay, Fred VanVleet is playing today, so that's good
Okay.
to know.
I
All
like
right,
Van Vliet actually.
nice. All right, we've got three more games here. Before we get to the games, I want to mention like all these tools, the projections, the boom bust tool, the ownership, the lineup generator. You can get them all for free for 3 days. Like our job at Stokastic is really to help you win more money in your DFS lineups and your sports bets. So what we hope is that during those 3 days you try out the product, you have some success, and then you realize this is a good buy. You want to stick around. So make sure to take advantage of that 3 day free trial so that you can test everything out. All right. Houston at Dallas. On the Houston side, Jayshawn Tate is remaining out, but other than that, no injury news to speak of. So, what are you seeing as far as DFS plays?
Virtually nothing. You've got a pretty slow Dallas team. I mean, maybe they'll play a bit faster without Luka dribbling the ball for 20 seconds every possession, but you also have pretty correct pricing on Houston. Kevin Porter Jr., Jalen Green, Şengün, those are all guys that you can get to here and there, but they're also guys where I can just start naming like 3, 4, 5 guys at their respective positions or price points that I like better. So nothing really standing out from Houston. I think to me, they're one of the least appealing teams.
Agreed. I could see some going to Jalen Green. He's been seeing massive minutes in the last 5 games. So he's only 6,400 on DK, 6,500 on FanDuel. On the night slate, I think he's a killer play. In the regular slate, certainly someone in the mix. Dallas is definitely the more interesting side of this game because Luka has been ruled out for rest. In addition, Maxi Kleber is out. So there's a lot of minutes opened up here. I think like anyone that's a ball handler is really going to benefit with Luka out. So who do you see being the top plays from Dallas?
Yeah, so my 3 highest owned guys on DraftKings right now are all from Dallas. Tim Hardaway Jr., Dinwiddie, Christian Wood. Tim Hardaway Jr. obviously is like somebody that's difficult to trust because he's Tim Hardaway Jr., but he's essentially free. I'm assuming that he starts. That could be somebody else. Like you could get Christian Wood starting, you could get Josh Green starting, but I'm thinking Hardaway because he can handle the ball a bit. He is a relatively high usage guy. Like if you put Josh Green into the starting lineup, or you were to put Campazzo or Ntilikina into the starting lineup, like other ball handlers, you really are putting a lot on Dinwiddie when he's out there with say Green, Finney-Smith, Bullock, Powell. There is like no offense on the floor there outside of Dinwiddie. So to me, Hardaway makes the most sense if they're going to go ball hand. Like if they're going to go with a guard, Hardaway makes the most sense to me. He has played 111 minutes without Luka this year. He has a 28.9% usage rate. He's averaged a fantasy point per minute. Also has a 24% assist percentage. And a lot of those minutes are with Dinwiddie too, because of the rotations Dallas runs. Dinwiddie's typically with the second unit. So it's not like you're talking about a spot where if Hardaway starts, his rates are going to go down a lot. He just really stands out to me as a play where if he doesn't come through, like whatever, I'm fine losing tonight. Dinwiddie pretty close to that as well. Obviously more expensive, but 1.13 DraftKings points per minute for him so far this year without Luka, 26.5% usage rate, 42.9% assist percentage. We saw him dominate last year when he was with Washington and whenever Beal was out. We saw him dominate with Dallas whenever he'd play without Luka. Good matchup. Very happy to go back to him. And then I think it's likely that you see more minutes from Christian Wood here, in addition to probably more productive minutes, because you have to keep in mind, Luka plays 37 minutes a night. So even with Wood coming off the bench and only playing 24, 25 minutes per game, you're talking about half or more of those minutes coming with Luka, and now they won't be. And then also, Wood's typically not in the closing lineup because you have Luka, you have his scoring, you can afford to go to more defensive-minded players. Here, I think there's a better chance that you just get a few extra minutes for Christian Wood too, because you need his offense. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he manages to get into a closing lineup over, say, Reggie Bullock or Dwight Powell. I don't think that's really surprised anybody. So I really like getting to Christian Wood as well. All 3 of those guys look absolutely fantastic to me.
Yeah, definitely. I think like you can definitely mix and match all 3 from a game theory perspective. would you play all three in the same lineup in a large field tournament, or like is it something where you might want to maybe have two out of three?
I have no issue with all three of them. Like I
Okay.
think, I just think they're all underpriced enough. Where I
Yeah.
mean, especially because when you think about Dallas, like where else is the scoring coming from? There's no other usage on this team.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a possibility they can go out there and they only have to outscore the projection by about 3 points apiece to be 10 points above value. So that's a pretty significant threshold where if like all your players score 10 points above value, you should have a pretty good chance of having the winning lineup. So
Yeah.
I think
Somebody
that's
asked if we were worried about Dinwiddie playing 41 minutes last night. The way I always view that is like I would prefer he hadn't played 41 minutes last night, but when you look at everything, from just like a macro perspective, I care a lot more about the fact that Luka's out and he's $6,700 than I do that he played 41 minutes last night.
fair. All right, let's look at next game. We got New York at Denver. So on the New York side, we don't really have any injuries to speak of, aside from Robinson continuing to be out. Hardenstein has been all over the place. So one game playing like in the 30s minutes, but then sometimes he doesn't even start. So do you have any read on what's going to happen tonight?
The minutes are obviously really volatile. I do kind of like the playing time that he's gotten as a starter. He played 38 minutes, then he played 32, but that was also a game where he missed like 6 minutes in the first half to foul trouble. Then you had the game where he got benched. Basically, they just didn't play in the fourth quarter. They were getting embarrassed by OKC. And then yesterday, he was in massive foul trouble, but he still played pretty solid rotations when he was out there. So I still think that projecting him around, 28, 29 minutes makes sense based on what we've seen. That said, it's still like I'm getting to him around 10%. He's, I think, a perfectly fine play, but there's obviously a lot of guys that I like more.
Nice. Is there anyone else on New York that you like tonight?
Cam Reddish somehow got cheaper on DraftKings. I don't think there's any priorities from New York, but I do think it's worth noting that Reddish got cheaper. And their rotation in general, I think you can see big minutes from pretty much everybody. They had reported, and Thibodeau had said that he was essentially going to be removing Fournier and Grimes from the rotation. Fournier kind of said today, like, yeah, I get it. We're just trying to win games. I still, gave a couple minutes to Grimes just to be cautious, but I do think you continue to see a lot of minutes from Reddish. Similarly, I think you can see a lot of minutes from Emmanuel quickly. Like it's really easy to see him just get 24, 25 minutes. Certainly not a great option or anything on the slate, but I do think it's just another guy that isn't going to pull ownership and is kind of interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, that's interesting that Fournier and Grimes both didn't play, and it seems like Reddish has been a primary beneficiary of some of the other guys not playing as well. So I think Reddish is a pretty reasonable play. And then quickly, also it seemed like he got a lot more minutes with Fournier being out of the rotation. So is it pretty clear that's going to continue tonight?
It's my assumption, especially based on Fournier essentially saying like, yeah, I don't take it personally. Like that's just, what we're doing. I gave like, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes to Grimes just because I didn't really feel the need to give quickly like 28 or something. But you got 25 and a half from quickly last game. I wouldn't be surprised at all if you get that same range tonight.
Nice. That is good to know. And then on the Denver side, a lot of injuries here. Well, Jokic is out. Bones Highland was doubtful, but now he is questionable. Aaron Gordon is questionable. So if Aaron Gordon is out also, like then this is a complete mess. But with Jokic out, that's like the MVP basically, and there's a lot of stats to be redistributed to the rest of the team. So what are you thinking the starting lineup's going to be? Like who's going to fill in for Jokic here?
My guess is that DeAndre Jordan starts. My guess is that DeAndre Jordan does not close. I wouldn't be shocked if they did something else. DeAndre Jordan is really, really bad, but they also just don't have that many, good options. Zeke Naji, could start. I wouldn't be surprised at all if you see like Jeff Green in the closing lineup, or if they just really go with a small lineup and go Bruce Brown out there or something. But I expect Jordan will at least get the first shot. And from a fantasy standpoint, he's still fine. He's a fantasy point per minute guy. If he starts, I would expect him to play around 22 minutes. Looks fine. I've kind of mentioned it throughout the show. If he plays 22 minutes, he projects well. I do think that's beatable by other guys like, Andre Drummond or, some of these other relatively inexpensive guys that I've mentioned, Mo Bamba. But if Jordan starts, he looks like a pretty good value. Still, just given how much value there is on the slate, I'm more interested in the actual like big pieces here. Jamal Murray hasn't started a game without Jokic since like 2019, but has about a 29% usage rate without him on the floor since the start of 2020. Michael Porter Jr.'s usage rate should go up. Aaron Gordon is more productive if he's able to play. Bruce Brown should get a bunch of minutes at 5,100 one way or the other. You also have you have Bones Highland questionable now. He was ruled out earlier in the day. That could have an impact, but one way or the other, I expect Bruce Brown to play a good amount. He played a ton last game with Highland out. So just getting to all of those guys, I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, definitely. This is it seems like this slate, like just having a lot of exposure to these last games makes a ton of sense because with Jokic out and Luka out, that just opens up a lot of value. So pretty much anyone on Denver, like is a good option. Porter Jr. and Gordon, maybe like, well, Gordon's questionable, but MPJ, like I think that he looks like someone that could really benefit from increased usage as well as Jamal Murray. So I think this one, it's gonna be an interesting one. So on the last game of the night, Golden State at Phoenix, let's quickly run through our options here on Golden State. No injuries that we're aware of yet. Do you see any standout plays?
No, I mean we have been getting more playing time from Golden State, which is nice, but the price tags have pretty much adjusted as well. You're up to 10,500 for Curry, Draymond at 6,100, Clay at 5,700 looks okay, but still just doesn't look as good as a lot of other options for me. So I do think it's likely to be a competitive game, and that's good for playing time as well. But outside of just mixing in some Steph or some Clay here and there, I don't really see much from the Golden State side.
Agreed. On the Phoenix side, Chris Paul doubtful as of now. So I think that opens up some nice value on Phoenix. Well, actually, it normally would, but he's been out for 3 games already. So kind of seen it already where Booker, Aiden, solid plays, but nothing that we haven't, and nothing I feel like you got to go out of your way to get. What do you think?
So I do I do still actually really like Phoenix here with Paul out because I think it's kind of just gone completely under the radar. Landry Shamet plays significant minutes for this team, and he's also out. So you've been getting huge minutes, not only for Miles Bridges, but Devin Booker's been playing around 40 minutes. And then obviously, gets a production bump without Chris Paul. There's a lot of minutes available for Torrey Craig. Not that he's a priority, but still only 4,300. DeAndre Ayton, I think, is completely mispriced here. He's actually been a little bit worse without Paul on the floor this year, but still $6,100 coming off a game where he played 34 minutes. I think he's interesting. Cam Payne should play like 35 minutes or so. He's a fantasy point per minute guy against a fast-paced Golden State team. I actually think there's a lot of minutes available here, and I think it's getting slept on a little bit just because like Landry Shamet's not typically someone people think of, but I think it actually really affects this rotation.
Yeah, that's what I noticed as well. Like Craig played a ton of minutes 2 games ago. Yeah, last game he was in pretty big foul trouble, so wouldn't be surprised if he plays more minutes than people are expecting tonight. So that's definitely one to look out for.
Yeah, and we got Dwayne Washington took over as the backup to Cameron Payne last game, played 19 minutes behind them, had a really big game. Not saying that's going to happen again, but that was just another rotational change. You got less minutes from the centers. Landale played 8 minutes. Biyombo played 5. So you still got 48. It was just that Ayton played more of them. But then Washington took up those backup point guard minutes behind Payne.
Nice. All right, so we got one last super chat here. Thank you, Green Gang. Am I playing Reddish on FanDuel for 3,500? Yay or nay? By the way, shout out to the Stokastic team. Thanks, Green Gang. And I think 3,500 for Reddish, like especially now that Fournier and Grimes are out of the rotation, seems like a pretty good value. So I endorse it. What do you think?
Yeah, min salary for a guy playing like 33, 34 minutes. He hasn't been a good fantasy producer overall this year, but he has stepped it up recently. And I mean, what it really comes down to is if they're not going to play Fournier and Grimes, if they're actually not going to do that, there's just so many minutes available because they're not really playing. They're playing pretty much 48 minutes, slightly less than 48 minutes of Hartenstein and Sims. Randall and Toppin, like they're not playing Toppin at the 3. So it just opens up. If Grimes and Fournier aren't going to play, it opens up so many minutes for the like Barrett, Quickly, Reddish trio. Because like Brunson and Rose are never playing alongside each other. So as long as they stick to their word there's a ton of minutes for Cam Reddish.
Definitely. And we've seen it before, so it's nothing we don't don't feel confident in. So like it. Guys, stay tuned. We got Eric and Terry leading you all the way up to lock and past lock to go over some of the news in that first 30 minutes. If you could hit the like button, I would greatly appreciate that. And check out our sponsor, No House Advantage. A great place to play. They're returning more money than you're putting in, and we got a lot of tools on Stokastic to help you win there. So, guys, good luck tonight, and stay tuned.
Yo, it's that time of week again. The time for Stokastic Hall of Fame, where we induct all of our closest friends in the Stokastic family into the Hall of Fame right here and give away a bunch of free months of Stokastic Plus Platinum. All you have to do, if you want to get yourself inducted into the Hall of Fame, get yourself up on the board so we can do the bragging for you and so you can get that free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum, is download the Stokastic avatar at stokastic.com/avatar. We got a new one, by the way, if you're looking to refresh and update the previous one. Then finish top 3 on a field of 5,000 or more and tweet your wins at Stokastic HOF on Twitter, Stokastic Hall of Fame. Boom. You get up here and you win a free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum. That's all you got to do. First up, let's get straight into it. The Colts just continues his massive heater. When he's not winning at DFS, he's behind the scenes here at Stokastic, working hard on all of the tools. 100K, another 6-figure win. What's that? 8 on the season? Something egregious like that. And then Michael Yamada coming in with a almost $57,000 win. Dupes are bad in Showdown unless you got it at the top, he says. Thank you, Player Q DFS, for your single game analysis. Laffy Makajeski for the strategy breakdowns. Best team in the business. I would agree. Schaefer chopped the NBA Showdown thanks to Stokastic. Fantastic tools. Easy for me to say. Do I get to be in the Stokastic Hall of Fame? Damn right you do, man. $15,000 win. First place in the fadeaway. Then you got Jeremiah Kenny. Been playing NFL and NBA DFS for years, but turns out I'm actually a CFB savant. Who knows? Yeah, looks like it. $27,500 wins in the same contest there. And Lance Simpson, my first decent win in basketball this season. I absolutely love No House Advantage, and you will too. Yeah, we've been telling you guys about that overlay for a minute now. Thanks to everyone in the team, and I'm not reading all those names, and everyone else at Stokastic. Next, how about Robert? $15,000 win. Told you we had some big ones this week. Shout out to Alex Baker, the GOAT, and the Showdown Shaman. Wonderful name. Wonder who created that. Thanks for all you do for the amazing Stokastic tools. And a couple more before we close this out. Kenny got bumped out of first with a Paul George game-winning shot in the last game of the night, but hey, back at it again today. Hey, Minimax turning that into $300. We'll take that every day. And Johnston, fun night. Appreciate everything you guys do. $780 there. Wrapping this one up is Rounder Boy DFS, the dime. Enter with 10 cents. And you guys, you get in, free month, get in the Hall of Fame. Can be 10 cent. Nickel, doesn't matter what you're buying in with. $162 in the dime. We'll get back at it again. More Hall of Fame inductees, more free months of Stokastic Plus Platinum. Remember, just download the avatar. Tweet your wins at Stokastic HOF and get it all right here.
Stokastic countdown, Jordan. What is happening, everybody? Welcome to another Stokastic NBA Live Before Lock, and it's a doozy. We've got a 10-game slate, but it's not just any 10-game slate. Terry McBride is joining us. That's exciting. But in addition, we have so many players that are ruled out already. Key players, by the way. Luka Doncic resting today. Nikola Jokic, he's out. He's in the health and safety protocols. And then we've got so many players that are big names that are on the injury report that I'm sure we're going to have to be talking about as we go through. Tyrese Halliburton, Donovan Mitchell, Drew Holiday, Wendell Carter Jr., Aaron Gordon, Bones Highland, just to name a few that could potentially shape the slate. Terry, how are you doing, though? You just came back from vacation.
Yeah, I'm doing good, pal. I got back on Monday, had a great trip down to Orlando with the family, like we were talking about just before the show started up there, and just playing some catch up. You know, I missed like the Joel Embiid 100-point game the other night, and I was interested to find out about that midway through a show. The other day, my first show back for one of the No House Advantage shows during the afternoon. It's my first live before lock. It's a chaotic one. We got a lot of moving parts. I kind of wish we had the Orlando and Indiana news right now, but we'll take what we got, and at least we know a bunch of the big moving parts already, right, for this slate. So it's an interesting one, should be a fun one, and I'm psyched to talk through it with you.
By the way, Jordan, I see there's a super chat here from Green Gang. Did they hit on that last show or no? They did? All right, cool. All right, just making sure that we got all the super chats here covered. If anybody has questions, throw those in. If you guys are in the Discord chat, you could always ask me those questions. I know people get really fired up about these questions. Wolfie isn't here to get upset about your guys' questions anymore. We did away with him today. Eric Lindquist, he is currently suspended, but he should be back in the near future from his most recent suspension. But anybody has any questions, fire those into the Discord. It is one of the perks of being a Stokastic Plus Platinum member. I want to ask you, Terry, because you just mentioned that we did get a lot of the key news. And I'm kind of curious because of all of the news we've had, and obviously the biggest piece is Jokic being out, Luka being out. Which team are you getting to the most in terms of total exposure to? Like, who are your most exposed players in terms of teams they're coming from, if that follows?
Yeah, so I think on both sites, the answer to that's going to be Dallas. We've got Christian Wood, Spencer Dinwiddie, Tim Hardaway Jr. They're all pretty unavoidable across both sites, particularly on DK. You're getting Timmy over there at just 4,000 with multi-position eligibility between shooting guard and small forward. It's got him coming up 21% optimal. By comparison, at 4,500 on FanDuel, he's 13% optimal, still drawing a ton of ownership attention, some negative leverage on both sites, negative for all three of those guys, but they're just strong pieces based on the expectation of the minutes that these guys are going to play and the usage they're going to see. Adam was just talking about it on the end of the last show, just the idea of Christian Wood just getting a little bit more time out there and a little bit more focus because they're going to need some offense to come from somewhere. It's not the most comfortable play in the world in my mind. Dinwiddie and Hardaway, maybe I've just been burnt too many times by both of them, but it just maths out so well that they're fairly unavoidable. And I really don't care that much about the negative leverage. If I'm under 51%, which is where we've got Spencer Dinwiddie pegged right now on FanDuel, he's 6,800 multi-position between point guard and shooting guard. I'm okay being a little bit under that, but I think that's going to be, something where I'm around the field and it just, the value just plays through. And it's just, it's stronger than any concerns about negative leverage.
Yeah, and also, if you guys are playing cash games, you just need to have these guys in. So just reading off, across FanDuel and DraftKings, these are where our current ownership stands on some of these Dallas players. The three most rostered players on DraftKings, Spencer Dinwiddie at $7,100. He's 43% owned. Tim Hardaway, 39% owned. Christian Wood, 34% owned. Over on FanDuel, the most popular players. Number one, Spencer Dinwiddie, 54% ownership, which you referenced before. Christian Wood, 35% ownership. We don't have quite as much ownership on Tim Hardaway on FanDuel, but still, he's 31% owned. If you guys are playing cash games today, all three of them should be in your lineup in both FanDuel and DraftKings. Something else to add about the Christian Wood situation, it's not just that Luka is out. Maxi Kleber and JaVale McGee are also out in the front court. So we've seen Christian Wood's minutes be a little bit inconsistent at times this year. They just don't have that many guys to go to in the front court. I do think that solidifies his minutes in addition to the extra usage he's getting sans Luka. So Dallas is also, to me, the team that I'm getting the most exposure to. I know there's a lot of ownership there. I think it's totally unavoidable today.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, they're just popping up to the top of the board. And, maybe you're trying to just target two of those guys in a lineup instead of all three of them in a lineup. I can get that. I can get behind that to just create a little bit of shakeup and a little bit of variability. But I do think each one of those guys are going to be big pieces of the overall construction. And then we're just playing the game. All right, which one of these guys comes through? What else can I get to with them? How am I building lineups and what comes together around those guys? Big piece kind of came down in the last couple of minutes as well. It looks like Dedmon is likely to play is what they're saying now. now. So that's a good one that we don't have to make changes for. I was planning on him being in, and I'm happy to see that does seem to be the case. He was another guy that's trending up toward the top of the board.
We could talk about that next. That was actually the next thing I wanted to ask you about, because I was also assuming that Dedmon was going to play. Also, we just got news that Halliburton is available to play. So good news for us.
That was the other one.
Right there. The less things I have to update at this point, the better I get. I've got enough value. I've got enough guys I like. I don't need to add another 3-7 value pieces to the mix. But Dedmon to me is a very key value piece now, because he's somebody already a good fantasy producer. We've seen him start in the past, generally produces pretty good results. He's very cheap on both DraftKings and FanDuel. And there are just not other big men that are available for the Miami Heat, which I'm going to touch on in a second. But for the year, 12 minutes per game for Dwayne Dedmon, scoring about 12.5 fantasy points. You're looking at over a fantasy point per minute. Even if you try to be conservative with Dedmon and say he's only going to play 24, 25 minutes, well, you're ending up with a 25, 26 fantasy point projection, which is pretty good relative to his salary. And even that might be a little bit too conservative with his minutes. I'm trying to be closer to his floor, because if you give him the minutes that I actually think he's most likely to play, he ends up in 100% of lineups because of just his price and the points per dollar production. But here's the front man, the big man situation for the Heat. Dedmon's in, Adebayo's out, Yurtseven's out, Udonis Haslem's out. That actually would have mattered today. Udonis Haslem, whether he was in or not. That's how shorthanded they are. But with no Bam, no Yurtseven, no Haslem, Dedmon's the only big man that they really have left to go to here who's a center. So I don't really see any way around him also as a value play. Let me see where we ended up with his ownership. 29% right now on FanDuel, on DK 31%. I'm actually overweight to those numbers. It's, to me, if we're looking for a play sub 4K, he's actually the best in my opinion, both FanDuel and DK.
Yeah, I mean, he's just looking very, very strong. And to your point, we've only got him projected, at least of the last time I updated this dashboard I'm looking at 22.6 minutes. That might come up a little bit now that we've gotten the confirmation that he's going to play, but call it 24, call it 25. He's already sitting 12% optimal on FanDuel, 18% optimal on DK. That made him the 5th most optimal overall player on DK. For a $3,400 center, you can definitely do worse. He's center only on FanDuel, but he's the dead minimum price. And a lot of the FanDuel centers have some multi-position eligibility. There's just a lot of guys you can bounce between power forward and center. So I think it really helps things come together nicely. I actually just gave him a little bit of a nudge in the lineups that I'm building right now. And I've just got to get these things jammed into my sim. It's good news that Halliburton's playing, but it's definitely good news that he's playing. And I'm going to have a bunch of them here as the sim runs. I expect to see his name quite a bit. 3,500, just a ton of value at that center spot on FanDuel today. The next highest guy, if we sort by optimal lineup rate on the FanDuel slate, we're talking about, multi-position on Christian Wood, multi-position on Kevin Love. These are guys who have center eligibility. Miles Turner also multi-position. The first center-only guy is Dwayne Dedmon himself. The next one down the list is DeAndre Jordan, who's at 4,000 on the FanDuel slate. Jordan's a bit of a different play from FanDuel to DK today. I think that does get a little bit more sticky between those two because he's 3,300 on the DK slate. He's coming up 18% optimal on DK. So I think you get a little bit of back and forth between Dedmon and Jordan on the DK slate, more so than you do on FanDuel. FanDuel, it just breaks down interestingly here.
One thing that's actually going to impact me when it comes to DeAndre Jordan, first of all, he sucks. He's terrible.
Yes, agreed.
I'm assuming that he probably starts because he's played the backup center minutes for the Nuggets this year with Jokic out. It would make most sense that he moves into the starting lineup, but he's been so terrible this year. And Zeke Naji recently came back. I think there is a possibility that number one Naji would start at center. But something else that could totally throw this into another sort of situation is if Aaron Gordon gets ruled out, because then it's one less opportunity for Denver to potentially go small. It does seem like that's news that we're not going to be getting anytime during this show, because that's a game that locks at 10 p.m. Eastern time, so well after we're done here. But I do worry that DeAndre Jordan's minutes might not be as secure as we think, just because he's so terrible that he could play himself off the court.
Yeah, there's always that reasonable expectation of DeAndre Jordan just being DeAndre Jordan here. So I'm totally with you. I'm happy that we're getting the Dedmon minutes, so I don't really have to sweat it on the FanDuel slate where I'm playing. I'll probably have a little bit of DeAndre Jordan, but I was also curious about some of the Orlando guys like Mo Bamba. I think is going to trickle into some of my lineups, almost regardless of whether Wendell Carter Jr. plays. I think that Adam made a pretty strong point about Mo Bamba's tournament viability, even with Carter on the floor. And I think that's the last piece of 7 p.m. information information we're waiting for as far as news goes in those early games. But yeah, I'm content to get away from DeAndre Jordan. 0.99 FanDuel points per minute so far this year, but not really seeing all that much time. And he's just a guy who doesn't make a ton happen in my mind on the floor. So happy to get away from him. You do see the change if Aaron Gordon doesn't go, like you said, could be a little bit more of a bump there. So maybe we get to a little bit more of him in that situation. But he's the guy I'd be happiest, I think, to cross off my list of potential value plays here.
Yeah, I have him in 11% of my lineups right now. That number would go up if Aaron Gordon was ruled out. I'm also getting to a fair amount of Aaron Gordon. So we'll see what ends up happening later on. And who knows, maybe we'll get that information post-lock. And as per usual, the show doesn't end at lock. Terry and I sticking around for 30. I hope somebody told Terry that he's sticking around for 30 minutes. And this isn't catching him by surprise. But Terry, you and I, we're not going to be done in 44 minutes. We're going to be sticking around for the 30 minutes post-lock. We've got some questions coming in now. And by the way, if you guys did miss, Halliburton is in today. So he's good to go. Not something we have to adjust for. First, a question from our guy, Seth in the Discord channel. My wife's boyfriend is really stressed out waiting for the Wendell Carter Jr. news. If Carter is out, would you prefer Bamba or Dedmon? So if it becomes really interesting if Carter is not able to play, because Bamba is a really, really good fantasy producer. What I think will ultimately end up happening in that case, I'll probably just play both of them a whole bunch. And this is news that we're definitely going to get before lock, because that game starts in 43 minutes. I would assume that Bamba and Dedmon would appear together in a lot of my lineups, and it would just pinch most other centers. The biggest cutout for me, as I said, DeAndre Jordan's already somebody that I'm about half the field on. I would probably get to a very limited amount of DeAndre Jordan. If Wendell Carter Jr. is out, I would just have a lot of Bamba Dedmon lineups.
Yeah, I'm actually just creating a little filter to look at all those guys side by side. And really, yeah, those are I would much prefer the Dedmon and Bamba side of it. Just looking at the numbers, 1.03 FanDuel points per minute for Dedmon, 1.0 on the nose for Bamba. And we've just seen Bamba be that guy in the past. 1.08 FanDuel points per minute last season, 1.06 DraftKings points per minute last season. He's just slightly above the other two in terms of production. And then getting Dwayne Dedmon at 3,500, 3,400 from site to site. The 3,500 on FanDuel makes a big difference. He stands out by comparison to DeAndre Jordan. So I agree with you. It would probably come down to I'm just slicing shares at center on FanDuel between Dedmon and Bamba for the most part, and leaving Jordan on the table because of his higher price as compared to Dedmon. And then on the DK slate, I do think all three would be in the mix more, but I'd be more inclined to look at the Dedmon and Bamba shares. I just think there's a little bit more upside. And if the world is going to shares of DeAndre Jordan, when we're talking about him being the least productive of these guys, the least exciting of these plays, at a 17% ownership share that's basically level with his probability of being in the optimal lineup, I'm, again, happy to get away from him, focus more on the other two.
Let's answer some super chats that are coming in. And by the way, Dedmon right now is my guy, and we'll see what ends up happening with some of that news. 41 minutes, and at some point, I would assume probably within the next 20 minutes or so, there's going to be a Wendell Carter Jr. update. Shane Daly wants to know, how is your strategy different for a single entry contest versus 150? Thanks for the content. So for me in basketball, it's wildly different than baseball. Generally, if I'm being honest, for basketball, I'm usually entering my highest projected lineup into single entry. Maybe I have a lineup that's one of my second or third highest projected that maybe has much lower ownership that I'd prefer to get in. But by and large part, I care a ton about ownership in single entry for baseball, where I think there's a lot of leverage to be had. Basketball's a little different. I'm generally just playing the lineups that project the best for me.
Yeah, basketball, we're talking about, rates versus time, and a lot of the other stuff kind of falls by the wayside, where baseball, it doesn't work that way. So you can make those lower owned plays. You can take a bit of a stand saying, all right, this 4-man stack going up against this pitcher, not getting all that much popularity, doesn't necessarily look like it projects well, but baseball. With basketball, it just is a matter of these guys are going to be on the court at these prices with this production within a range of standard deviation and a half on either side of it. And you want to have those guys in your lineup. So you want to build out, maybe it's not the absolute apex of your projected lineups. Like, don't go to Fantasy Cruncher necessarily, run off 150 lineups and just pick the highest projected one. Also look at your ownership product, your potential to be unique and things like that. But yeah, you pretty much want to focus on those lineups that take you toward that optimal construction path. Look to have most of the most highly rated, most highly probable to be in the optimal lineup guys from our boom bust tool, then sort in maybe a couple guys with high boom scores and a little bit lower on the ownership side. Look for leverage that way. Holiday and try and grab one or two of those guys. But you don't really need to thin slice the ownership. You don't really need to chase it like you do in baseball. It's very different sports.
And the other thing too is, for me, at least in basketball on a slate like this, where I assume I'm going to be late swapping a lot after the slate starts, a lot of the ownership will kind of end up taking care of itself. Like if somebody unexpected gets ruled out after lock, and then all of a sudden I'm on just trying to throw out a random example. So the Orlando game, let's say that game started at 7:30 as opposed to 7:00. So just using generality, it's not going to be specific to this slate. If Wendell Carter was ruled out after lock, and then we had the opportunity to switch to Mo Bamba, I'd be playing Bamba in a ton of lineups, and he'd have a fraction of the ownership that he normally would have. Oftentimes, late swap kind of takes care of some of the ownership concerns just because of the nature of NBA DFS.
Yeah, I mean, we've got those nights where you kind of can get your lineups in, and then you can tinker around with late swap. You can move some pieces around depending on how the field looks. And then you've got those other nights where it's just like, hey, late swap is just nail polish remover, right? It just takes away, it completely changes the look of your night. You're going to have to get dressed up completely differently and go out with a different kind of a style. So it is the way to go, focusing on those late swap situations. And I do think this is going to be kind of an important one. I wish that game for Orlando was starting at 7:30, because if that Carter news goes the opposite way of how I planned it, that could have a big impact on some of these lineups.
Next super chat is from RaceFan22. He's asking us for a DK $100 single entry, Tim Hardaway Jr. and Giannis, or Dinwiddie and anyone $9,900 or under. So let me see. Who do I have at $9,900 or under as my best projected player? That would be Trae Young, but I'm not necessarily crazy.
99 or under?
Yeah. So for me, the answer is Tim Hardaway Jr. and Giannis of those combinations. Particularly,
I assume we're talking DraftKings pricing.
Yeah. He wants to know for DraftKings, it was Tim Hardaway Jr. and Giannis, or Dinwiddie and another player $9,900 or under. That's going to be Hardaway Jr. and Giannis for me, especially because we have the chance that Jrue Holiday could be ruled out, and that would boost Giannis.
Yeah, I do see, just looking at the board, if we sort by pricing on DK, getting Giannis at 12.6, and then the next highest guy is Jason Tatum at 10.9, you can kind of look down the optimal column and see how that impacts the probability of some of these guys being in the optimal lineup. And most specifically with Giannis, 3.5% as compared to like a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's 9,400, landing at 14%, as compared to an $8,700 Jaylen Brown landing at 18%. But you're talking about different caliber guys in terms of the raw scoring potential. And if you've got the money to afford that 12.6, I do think it makes sense to just build up toward Giannis on a lot of these lineups and let the field worry about the fact that he's not technically coming in optimal all that frequently. He's that kind of player that you can build in those value pieces. That's the guy you're paying for. And then you're just grabbing his raw scoring, taking it off the board at 3% ownership. So I do like the idea of increasing my upside on Giannis, getting more shares of him than the field. So I think I agree with that take on that specific side-by-side.
Next question comes from former Knicks great David Lee. Hey guys, if Highland is in your lineup, if Highland is in the lineup, are you prioritizing him? So Bones Highland was expected to not play today, was listed as doubtful, was upgraded to questionable this afternoon. If Highland is in, I am not going to be prioritizing him. So there's extra usage to go around in Denver with the absence of Nikola Jokic, but Bones Highland, I don't think stands to gain a ton in terms of playing time with Jokic out. So to me, there's other players I prefer. Here's the situation where it would matter potentially for Bones Highland. If he is in and Aaron Gordon is out, then I think they might just have to play smaller lineups where Bones Highland plays more. For right now, I have Bones Highland and Aaron Gordon both in, and I'm getting to a very minimal amount of Bones Highland. I only have 2 lineups with him in it. But how about for you, Terry? If Bones Highland is in, are you going to be playing him? I'm just going to add, though, there are some more variables that I think are going to be in play here.
Yeah, I didn't see him really jumping to the top of the board. If he does get the situation where there's no Aaron Gordon, yeah, maybe we get a little bit more production out of him, a little bit more time on the court out of him. But I've had him in this whole time, and he's not a name that I've really seen come up all that frequently. So definitely not a priority. Not somebody I would necessarily run and chase out of a couple lineups if I saw him trickle through, but not somebody I'm really focused on saying, oh, damn, I got to get to some more Bones Highland here.
And we just got some news. So big news dump here from the Milwaukee Bucks. Jrue Holiday out, Pat Connaughton, Grayson Allen also out. The most important one here, though, is Jrue Holiday. So I'm going to pull up some of the rates this year with Jrue Holiday off the court. I don't really think this benefits anybody on the Bucks for this particular slate in a major way outside of Giannis. I think this is a nice little projection boost we could give to Giannis Antetokounmpo. But Javon Carter isn't somebody that I'm dying to play. He's already priced up from the absence of other players. He's the guy that's mostly benefited this year from some of the injury situations in Milwaukee. But once again, the price is already caught up at this point. But let's see. So we take Jrue Holiday off the court. But Wendell Carter Jr. also just ruled out. So we got a lot of shit we're about to change.
There we go.
First, the update here on, and the super chats. I know those are there too. We're going to hit on those next. But with Jrue Holiday off the court this year, Giannis Antetokounmpo is scoring 62.82 DK points per 36 minutes. That is also overall a little bit of a usage increase. So, I mean, Giannis is such a crazy good fantasy producer. Like he's a 40.1% usage rate this year with Jrue Holiday off the court, but it's kind of around where he's typically at anyhow. So when we're looking at Giannis, a little boost for him, but he already should be projecting really well. So a little more production going to Giannis, but it's not something I think would overhaul the amount of exposure I'm getting there. So number one, Terry, what does this make you think of Giannis? And is there anybody from the Bucks that we should be giving a big upgrade to other than him, potentially with the absence of Holiday?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's mostly just focused on give Giannis a little bit more of a bump. It supports what we were just saying before about just the general upside and the idea of how many potential 70 fantasy point scorers do we have on this slate. He's really the guy with with a lack of Jokic, with a lack of Doncic. So I think we do focus on Giannis, and it just justifies getting to all those additional shares of him as a pay up spot. We'll probably see his ownership take a little bit of a jump, but it's still very difficult to get to him at 12.6. He's got a little bit more value on the board at 11.8 on FanDuel. Some multi-position between power forward and small forward there, power forward and center on the DK slate. Always worth getting to Giannis. Looking around this team, I don't love the idea of getting to Javon Carter either. 5,600 on the FanDuel slate, 5,800 on the DK slate. He's just kind of priced around where he should be as a 0.84 fantasy point per minute guy for the course of the regular season, 1.09 fantasy points per minute over the last 3 and 37 minutes a game for the last 3. So there is some idea of upside, but I think there's a lot of moving pieces through those guard spots as well. Some of those guys that I named before from that like upper mid range are guys that we want to slot into some of these guard spots. So I don't think he provides or creates the value necessary in those positions. He's just kind of another guy for me. Nobody else really takes a major leap for me looking at the board. So yeah, I think it's really the Giannis story from the Bucks side of things.
Yeah, we're about to do a lot of updates here. We're about to go over a lot of new information. The Wendell Carter news, that's going to be a pretty big one. So I'd be remiss if I didn't point out the best way for you guys to get access to all the tools we have over at Stokastic.com for cheap. First of all, 3-day free trial. That is something, if you guys have not signed up yet, you get 3 days for free. Check out all the stuff we have behind the paywall, stuff like our player projections, ownership projections, our lineup generator tool, which is the easiest way to build lineups quickly. But also, if you guys don't have a BetMGM account yet, sign up with BetMGM by clicking on the link that's about to be thrown into the YouTube chat. Because if you sign up using that link, it's also below in the description box. You're going to get 2 months free of Stokastic Plus Platinum, but also a risk-free bet of up to $1,000. So if your first bet loses over at BetMGM, it's going to get refunded up to $1,000. So a lot of really good value there. And of course, you're going to get all of our tools 2 months for free when you sign up at BetMGM for the first time. Let's hit on the Mo Bamba situation. Now, I'm going to call it the Mo Bamba situation. I know that it's Wendell Carter Jr. who got ruled out, but what we care about here is how this is going to impact Mo Bamba. So I don't think we've seen a starting lineup yet. Let me just double check to make sure that is the case. But my assumption here is that Mo Bamba is going to start. And assuming that is the case, Terry, how much do we like Mo Bamba now on tonight's slate?
Quite a bit. 4,600 on the FanDuel slate, 4,400 on the DK slate. He was already sitting with some relevance when we had him at only 22.2 minutes in terms of the projection. I think he picks up a little bit of upside, and we talked about him already. I was talking about him in terms of being my favorite of those value centers, just based on the fact that I've seen Mo Bamba put these massive games up in the past. In 21.9 minutes the last time out, he had 28.5 FanDuel points. If he just gives me that, I'm kind of okay with it at 4,600. And I think there's significant upside beyond that if he's seeing a handful more minutes. 1.11 FanDuel points per minute over the last 3. He was a 1.08 FanDuel points per minute guy last year, 1.06 DK points per minute guy last year, sitting in an even 1 fantasy points per minute on both sides so far this year, but just given more to do. I always like getting to Mo Bamba. It's kind of, I was kind of hoping that we snuck that one through and we were maybe getting like a limited Wendell Carter and a low on Mo Bamba. I feel like his ownership's going to go up, but I think it's going to be commensurate with the rate at which his optimal lineup probability is going to go up. So I like the Mo Bamba spot here, and I'm glad I was building in that direction already. So no major change.
Is there anybody else from the Magic that also gets a bump? Because keep in mind, Paulo Banchero, he is out for the Magic. So it's a spot now where he was already a guy who took up a ton of usage, but Wendell Carter Jr. has also played a big role in the offense in terms of usage and also the rebounding. So are there other players that are benefiting from the Magic that we should also be getting exposure to now?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll see some stability for like a guy like Bol. I think you see some upside for a guy like Franz Wagner, but we're talking with Wagner especially, 23.8% usage rate on the season, just 0.9 FanDuel points per minute, 56.2% true shooting, a 20.3% assist rate. But I do think he's just going to be a guy out there who's going to have to see some uptick in production here if they're going to stay in this game. There's a good chance that they could just get smoked tonight. But I do think that there's a lot of narrative reason for him to see a little bit of an uptick. Chuma Okeke is a guy who will be on the court, probably see a couple additional minutes as well. So I could see him picking up a little bit of value. But between the two, I think Wagner's the guy I focus on a little bit more. Okeke 0.76 FanDuel points per minute on a 12% usage rate. He's just not that guy where I would expect all that much uptick in production. Kind of has to fall into it more than a guy like Wagner does. So it would probably be Wagner, but Mo Bamba easily the guy I'm most excited to get to from this Orlando team.
Yeah, so in terms of other guys, Wagner definitely sees a little bit of boost, more rebounds going to him. Jalen Suggs as well. There's just some extra usage to go around and potential that these guys now play a couple of extra minutes or one extra minute. So I'm not saying that Franz Wagner, Jalen Suggs are necessarily my favorite plays on this slate, but they're guys that I'm going to get to a little bit more when I wasn't really planning on getting to them before. So there's definitely some other impact here from Wendell Carter Jr. being out. Let's hit on some of these super chats now, get caught up on these, and I'm going to update some lineups. I'll also be on the lookout for when our ownership comes in. I'm going to be refreshing that page because I'm curious to see how this impacts some of the Magic guys. I really want to see what does this do to Dedmon's ownership? What does this mean for Mo Bamba's ownership? Because Mo Bamba in particular is somebody who I expect to become quite popular now. Yeah. But first, Michael McKinney, Greg, do I even need to ask? Who are our 5 favorite plays for a FanDuel cash game? So for FanDuel cash, players you absolutely need: Dinwiddie, Christian Wood, Tim Hardaway Jr. It's funny because I would have said Dedmon before, but I think you could go Dedmon or Bamba now. And they're both only center eligible. So I'm going to say Dinwiddie, Murray, Wood, Love, Hardaway, and then one of either Dedmon or Bamba, depending on, I'd say whichever fits easiest into your lineup spot last. Is there anybody that you disagree with of that list, Terry, or anybody you would add to it?
I think I would just come down a little bit more strongly on the Mo Bamba side of things, assuming that major difference between the $3,500 and $4,600 salaries wasn't buying you a massive upgrade. So it depends on how that comes out. Depends on what else you're putting in those other couple of spots that you didn't just name. But I totally agree with the rest of the value pieces there. Did you say Kevin Love in there at all?
Yeah,
you
did. He was in my 5.
Yeah, so he was the other one that's top of the board that I wanted to make sure we hit. But yeah, the Dallas guys, absolutely, we've talked about them, and I think Mo Bamba, I do like that side of it a little bit more, but there's a ton of value at the min price for Dedmon.
Next super chat we got is from Scorched Earth Incarnate. DK, large field, last man in, Anunoby, Wagner, or Healed. Thanks for all you do. Thank you. We appreciate the super chat. Given the most recent news, that's Franz Wagner for me.
Yep. Yeah, totally agree.
The next question we have in here is from William Collins. Best center play besides Dedmon and best point guard play. So Mo Bamba.
Yep. I'm with you on that.
Best point guard play. My gut feeling, I have to rerun my lineups for all the most recent news. I have a feeling it's Jamal Murray for me.
Just looking here. And it depends on whether or not this guy needs to pluck some value. and which site he's playing on, because on FanDuel, you do have Spencer Dinwiddie with point guard eligibility, and he's only a shooting guard on the shooting guard small forward, on the DK slate. Shooting guard only on the DK slate. And then you've also got Derek White on the board as a $4,900 value play on the DK slate, $5,000 value play on the FanDuel slate. I do think he's somewhat interesting based on where some of these optimal lineup rates and things are coming in. So it depends on the nature of the kind of play that you're trying to make at that position to a degree.
Yeah, that's a good point. It depends certainly on some of the salary, but I don't know whether he's asking about DraftKings or FanDuel because he didn't specify the site. But as I'm running my lineups, I guess we could do this in different tiers, Terry. How about here's an interesting way to answer the question. I'll do it for DraftKings, you do it for FanDuel. Best value point guard, best mid-range point guard, and best pay-up point guard for tournament purposes. How does that make sense?
Okay, I like that.
So for me,
go ahead.
For me, for value, it is Peyton Pritchard, somebody who we haven't seen play the extended minutes this year, but there's no Malcolm Brogdon and no Marcus Smart today. It should mean that those minutes are a little more secure for Peyton Pritchard. Mid-range, Jamal Murray, and if I'm paying up, it is LaMelo Ball for me.
Ooh, interesting. LaMelo. Okay. Looking at the FanDuel board, and I'm trying to piece this together as we're in the process of updating ownership, optimal rates, all that stuff. So sorting it by mid-range for FanDuel, you've got Spencer Dinwiddie at the point guard spot. He's just kind of sitting at the top of the board, has been pretty much all day for all these things. I'm ignoring the leverage. I can just pluck Spencer Dinwiddie off the top of the board. It's a little bit difficult because you do have Jamal Murray right there at 6,400. So he's kind of fitting into the same price tier. And then I was just talking about Derek White. He's 5,000. I would argue that that's not the kind of value play that you're talking about when you bring like a Pritchard into the conversation. Looking down the board, though, for somebody who's a little bit cheaper, a little bit similar in terms of the upside, I don't really see anybody. So if I can use that 5,000 price tag as my cheat on the value, I think I would go that route. And then pay up. Yeah, it's really, LaMelo does make a lot of sense there. Rozier's also sitting there with point guard eligibility, slightly higher, slightly cheaper on the FanDuel board. There's a lot of mix and match. A guy we haven't brought up at all so far, but with no Chris Paul, I think Cameron Payne's a little interesting. 5,900 point guard and shooting guard eligibility, so he's kind of in that mid tier as well. FanDuel's a lot less stark than I think the DK board is in that. If I was going just pure star play, it's got to be Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He's 10-4, so it doesn't really rate out in terms of our boom score or our optimal rate, I don't think. But if we're just saying pure scoring, pure expensive player, it's probably Shai at 10-4.
Yeah, so the reason for me the answer is LaMelo is number one, there's no minutes restriction to worry about anymore with LaMelo. Yep. And he's a little more expensive on DraftKings than FanDuel. I'm still getting to him a ton on DK, even at this price point, though. And while the production hasn't been crazy yet, the usage is there. And his price is cheaper than it was towards the tail end of last year. And I don't really think it's for good reason because, once again, he's not limited anyway. Gordon Hayward is out right now, so that's a little bit of a boost for him as well. But he finished last year as a $9,700 player, LaMelo Ball. And now we're getting him at a sub 9K price. The FanDuel price to me is really crazy. So LaMelo Ball, probably the last chance we have to play him at this kind of price, and I'm going to be in on it. Let's see.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. He's somebody that's, on you guys talked about it on the morning show. I think Adam was talking about it on the last show, just with the, perception of the limited minutes as opposed to what was the reality of a little bit of foul trouble. I do think makes that interesting. And I'm trying to figure out what the hell just went wrong with this pace that I just tried to do. So that's not good. But I do think that just, creates potentially a little bit of arguable sneakiness there for LaMelo too. So that's kind of interesting.
The next super chat is from my filler arc. He's saying Eaton or Bol. And he was asking this before Wendell Carter Jr. was out, but it was under the assumption Wendell Carter wouldn't play. I currently have, it was Bol and Eaton, not Bamba. So for me, that is Eaton over Bol. Eaton falls behind some other centers for me in terms of center eligible players. I like Dedmon more, I like Bamba more, I like Christian Wood more, but I do like Eaton more as a play in the utility spot than I do Bol. How about for you, Eaton or Bol?
Yeah, Ayton, just because of the way that he was priced on the DK slate was interesting looking all day, and nothing's really changed about that situation. So I like the Ayton side of that rather than trying to chase the potential value guys. It's just a more secure kind of a play, and just based on the $6,100 price tag, it makes a lot of sense. You're talking about a 1.01 fantasy points, 1.03 on the DK slate fantasy points per minute guy so far this year, potentially with a little bit more to do in terms of scoring tonight. 1.16 DK points per minute last year. So we know there's additional upside from what we've seen so far for him this year. It's just a good price on a good player. So I have no issues going to Ayton there.
By the way, we just got an ownership update. Bamba's not as popular as I thought he was going to be. Still picking up ownership, but 17% on DK, and over on FanDuel, Bamba is 11%. So Dedmon is still the chalk at center today. I think both of them are strong options. But if we are going to get the field playing this much more Dedmon than Bamba, I'm going to lean towards Bamba a little bit. So I was getting to more of Dedmon in my run. I'm gonna make sure that I give Bamba a little thumbs up here, get to a little more of him. I think he's going underrepresented relative to his upside. 14% on DK, the 11% on that does not look like enough ownership in my opinion for Mo Bamba. The field should be playing him more.
Yeah, no, that definitely sounds low for Bamba. The one thing I would say is, just without having eyes specifically on the situation that's creating between the value price there, when you can get Dedmon at the dead minimum and you have Bamba a little bit higher, there might be something that you're buying some key piece of, might enable access to Giannis a lot more. So there might be that thing that's creating that ownership difference where we don't see a guy like Bamba, where in a pure vacuum, we say, all right, Bamba's going to pick up a ton of value. His ownership should go up. As you run that through a crunch, it might not be the case just based on that salary difference, creating the access to Giannis and creating the flow of lineups in that direction. So I could see why it might happen, but it would not limit my interest in getting to additional shares of Bamba because the field won't be there. So I do like that idea.
Yeah, so it does look like he's getting slept on a little bit. We got a super chat here. Not really a question, more of a comment from Lemons50. Najee drops 40 tonight, and the Jordan Donks cry. I think the Jordan Donks have gone away at this point with the other value that's opened up at center. So DeAndre Jordan is now projected for 2% ownership on FanDuel, and he is projected for 12% ownership on DraftKings. He's not really popular anymore. Other values opened up.
Yeah, and I think that makes perfect sense. We talked about him a few different times in terms of him being my least favorite. And I think you were saying he was your least favorite out of those handful of value guys. And he was just a different play from site to site at 4,000 center only on the FanDuel slate. He wasn't already showing that much value, and I think he's just been leapfrogged by so many of these guys. At 3,300 on the DK slate, arguably still in play. You can put him side by side using that util spot. So I think he's still a little bit more in play over there, and might be a guy now that the field is going away from a little bit too much, which could create a little bit of a tournament scenario where getting to him might have a little bit more value than it did when he was just kind of a piece of mid-range chalk at 17%. If we see that drop down a little bit, I do think maybe you can squeeze some additional shares of him in. I don't get that excited about that scenario on FanDuel where, like, if his ownership drops from the 5 and change percent that we had it at before down to the 2s, I still don't know that I want to chase it. I just think there's better pieces to put at that center only spot than DeAndre Jordan here. I might leave a few in just in terms of the public getting away from it. It's not difficult to exceed 2 to 3% ownership. So maybe you have a handful of shares, but still not somebody I'm excited about getting to.
I just reran my lineups so it's updated for Drew Holiday being out. It's updated now for Mo Bamba and the most recent ownership on Bamba. I have 6% of DeAndre Jordan now. So it's somebody who, to me, I'm not really getting to in a very significant way. There's just other value plays I like. It's funny because early in the day when I built lineups, I didn't like DeAndre Jordan, but it was kind of a situation where you build lineups early in the day and it's just, hey, Jokic is out. That's the best value spot on the slate. And just by default, I was getting to DeAndre Jordan. There's other guys I like better now. And once again, if we see Aaron Gordon ruled out, that would change some of my exposures, but I'm going to have way more, for sure. I'm going to have way more of Mo Bamba and Dwayne Dedmon than I get to DeAndre Jordan. And I'm assuming when most people build lineups, that's the decision point they're making.
Yeah, I agree. I think that center spot is going to be pretty, oh God, I almost said pretty pivotal, pretty key tonight. That's just something you want to get to. And I think spreading it out between the Dedmon and Bamba side of things and leaving DeAndre on the table. I've been making a point this year to not go over the top, get excited about guys who are just flat bad players, flat low rate players, guys that I don't particularly think outshine, even in a new opportunity, a differentiated opportunity, outshine guys who are just on the court doing their normal thing. And I've been trying to take advantage of spots where the field is migrating away from guys who are just taking in their normal spot at their normal price and going to these perceived value plays. I've been trying to not overreact to some of the news this season so far, and it's been paying off. I haven't missed that many spots. I've been, I think I'm on the plus side of, avoid a bad spot versus miss a good spot. So that's something I've been paying attention to, and DeAndre Jordan is just firmly on that list for me.
Next super chat is from Kevin Cutler, and he wants to know, for FanDuel, who are the top 3-4 plays of lowest owned guys you are high on and using to sprinkle in to get different? So, it's a little subjective to say what are our favorite low owned plays, but let's try to say sub 10% at any position, Terry. Three guys that we could find on FanDuel. We just got an update to the boom bust tool a couple of minutes ago. So actually, Jordan, could you pull the boom bust tool up on the screen, and we'll look at it over for FanDuel, and we'll see who has some of the best leverage scores, because we just got this pulled in a couple minutes ago. We got a recent update. So let's look through some of the top leverage scores, and some of these guys also, it's going to be players that are picking up, like 1% ownership, that have, 4% expected probability. So maybe won't go quite that crazy, but in terms of players that you're actually getting into, like some reasonable clip of lineups, Terry, who are some of these low owned plays that you do like on FanDuel?
So from the top end, there's 2 point guards, or with one of them also having shooting guard eligibility, that are just two of the best raw scorers on the slate, not getting all that much ownership. I'm cheating a little. One's exactly at 10%, one's at 10.7%. So forgive the little cheat there. But Trae Young and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, two just excellent players, 9,400, 10.4 respectively. Trae being the cheaper of the two, both coming up 12, 13% optimal, both owned in that 10% range. So you've got a little bit of leverage on both of them. And we know that both of these guys can go out there and score more than enough to justify those salaries. I'd argue that Trae is a little bit cheap by comparison to SGA there. So maybe Trae I favor a little bit, but SGA is the higher raw projection of the two, slightly higher boom score probability on our board of the two. I think getting to either one of those, if you've got some salary to spend on a star caliber guy in that role, I think makes a ton of sense. Looking down the board a little bit, we've got Bol sitting under 10%, 9.3% ownership against the 32% boom score probability. His optimal lineup rate, just because of positioning at 5,300 at center with some of the other center values on the board, his optimal lineup rate is below 10% and technically is negatively leveraged. But we do have a ton of upside and a potential to just, for a guy who could just blow through the top of center scoring on the FanDuel slate and make some of those value guys irrelevant. And it's not like he's high priced at 5,300. So I think Bol probably not getting all the attention he should be getting there. And then you've got other mix and match pieces, Klay Thompson, CJ McCollum, Karl Anthony Towns, a guy we haven't really discussed all that much, 9,000 power forward and center eligible on FanDuel, a 40+ point projection and 18% boom score probability. Another guy not pulling a massive optimal lineup rate, but we know that Karl Anthony Towns from time to time can take the top off of a slate. So there's a lot of those upper mid type guys in that range, the 40 and 30 to 40 FanDuel point scores in that range that are going to be owned, 5 to 10% that I think you can get to and exploit.
By the way, we just got an ownership update because we did get confirmation Mo Bamba's starting, which we were expecting. We're always under that assumption. With Bamba starting, we did get an ownership update. He's become more popular, but not anything too insane. He is 24% owned on DraftKings, and over on FanDuel, Bamba at 21%. Still numbers that I'm overweight to by a decent clip, but it's a little tighter between him and Dedmon now. But just thought I should point out that that's come up a little bit, but still nothing insane. I think those are still numbers to be overweight to. What do you think of that, Terry?
Yeah, it's a spot that if it kills me tonight, I think it's going to, if he doesn't perform tonight, it's going to be a spot that kills me. But I'm more afraid of going away from that spot and having him put up that monster game that I kind of expect here, or at least very, very serviceable game for the 4,600. I see him being a guy who could potentially carry part of the field away with lineup construction and what he provides there. You do have, again, just to bring it back up, you do have the Dedmon $3,500 value that is going to create opportunity at other spots. He's coming up a little bit more optimal. He's also owned at a 21% rate, so they're similarly owned. Mo Bamba with a slightly higher boom score probability, a much higher median projection, slightly higher salary. So I just like that Bamba spot. If it burns me, it burns me.
Yeah, so we are getting a bunch of questions just came in. Before we get to the end here, guys, don't forget, like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. And the slate locks in 10 minutes, but it doesn't mean Terry and I are going anywhere. We're going to be sticking around for 30 minutes. We'll be reacting to any lineups and news that comes out. We'll be sweating the situations as the games come out. We'll be looking at our sponsor, No House Advantage, some of the props that they have up for tonight's games. If you guys haven't signed up at NHA yet, click on the link below and you get up to a $50 bonus on your first deposit. And there's been a ton of overlay on No House Advantage this year, which is something that you should be taking advantage of if you aren't already. I'm real forever. Is Mo Bamba blowout proof? Somewhat. I wouldn't be surprised if he plays in garbage time. Hard to know for sure, but he's played garbage time a lot this year. Phil Senzig, Oubre, or Michael Porter Jr. on FanDuel. I prefer Michael Porter Jr., especially because, so he also brought up here that they project the same. There's also a chance that Aaron Gordon doesn't play today. And in that case, Michael Porter Jr.'s projection would be quite a bit higher than Kelly Oubre's. So that to me could also be a tiebreaker there. Michael Porter Jr. over Kelly Oubre. William Collins, Towns, or Tatum on FanDuel. I prefer Tatum to Karl Anthony Towns today. Do you have a preference between those two?
Yeah, I prefer the Tatum side of things. I think Towns is a little bit cheaper, if I'm not mistaken. I don't have them side by side on my list here, but just in pure ranking, we've got Tatum projected higher. We've got him with a higher boom score, higher optimal lineup rate. So I prefer the Tatum side in a salary vacuum.
Super chat from Ryan Nelson. This is a really sharp memory because I wouldn't even remember this if he didn't bring it up. I don't know if Terry remembers it. A Terry and Greg stream with the Pacers starting at 7. This will start 10 minutes early. Be prepared. Do you remember that, Terry? Last year, you and I were doing a show towards the tail end of the year, and DraftKings randomly locked a Pacers game 10 minutes before the slate started. That is the fact that Ryan remembered that from a year ago when you and I were doing a show together is that's very sharp. That's impressive. Yeah, I would not. I've got the memory of a goldfish basically anyway. But yeah, had he not mentioned that, I never would have thought of that again. That's impressive. Does that ring any bells though? Do you remember that happening? Yeah. Now that it's come up, it rings a few bells. But yeah, was not something I was thinking about. Hopefully, we don't have to wrestle with that one tonight. That would be a cool some more questions that we will go through here in the Discord. One of the perks to being Stokastic Plus Platinum member, you could ask us these questions. How likely is that Toronto goes small and Dedmon gets hurt by that? There's some possibility, but at the same time as well, Dedmon is such a good points per minute fantasy producer, and he's so cheap on DraftKings and FanDuel. If he plays 22 minutes, you're seeing over 20 fantasy points from him, and he's still fine relative to his salary. So not anything that I think you should overhaul lineups about. Heflove wants to know, how do you project Larry Nance to get different at center on DK? Also, shout out to Seth's wife's boyfriend. So I ultimately with Larry Nance, the biggest issue is he has not played minutes alongside Valanciunas this year. I know that last night we saw big minutes from Nance, but it's because Valanciunas immediately got into foul trouble. By the way, Donovan Mitchell will play, so that's something that we don't have to worry about. I just think there's better plays than Nance at this point. I get a minimal amount of exposure to him, but Bamba's a higher priority. Dedmon's a higher priority. Christian Wood, DeAndre Ayton. I have Nance in 5% of my lineups. There's just other guys to get to, in my opinion. Yeah, he's just an incidental piece. He gets the closing minutes like Adam was talking about throughout the day on the different shows, but I just don't see enough reliable upside, projectable upside there for Nance that on a slate like this with so many options and so many options falling into value plays at those positions, he just doesn't really hit the board for me. So I totally agree with that take. Bream wants to know if I would play Lonzo Ball and Terry Rozier in the same lineup. I do not have any lineups with them together. I like LaMelo a lot, but I just don't have that many lineups with Terry Rozier. It's not anything like specific rules I set up in Fantasy Cruncher. I just don't get to lineups with the two of them together. Jets World wants to know Butler, Jaylen Brown, Fred VanVleet, or Wood, Tatum, and CJ McCollum. That is Wood, Tatum, and CJ McCollum for me. Yep, same. Are we prioritizing any of the Pelicans guys? I am not prioritizing any Pelicans guys. One I have the most exposure to is CJ McCollum, and he is in about 10% of my lineups right now.
Yeah, he's the one name that really came up for us throughout the show from the Pellies that I can think of off the top of my head. And I think it was just in that list that I was running down before of semi-low owned, semi-star caliber type guys. McCollum, certainly a guy who can fill up the scoring sheet part of the sheet and give us a nice little fantasy score here. I think he would be the one, as this sim is ending, that I'll see the most in these lineups, but not a guy I was going out of my way for, probably 10, 12%.
Next super chat here from Palmer Jones, Jaden McDaniels and Dwayne Dedman, or DeAndre Hunter and DeAndre Jordan. Boy, I mean, you hate to tell somebody to redo the lineups 4 minutes before lock, but of those players, I would say Dedman and McDaniels, just because I like Dedman more than DeAndre Jordan, and McDaniels versus Hunter is kind of like, I don't really care about either of them. But I don't think you need to be playing Jaden McDaniels on a slate like this. So I love doing Dedman, but the other guys,
yeah, keep the Dedman part and then just scan the salary board for somebody with a little bit higher optimal rate, boom score probability, and probably don't even sweat the leverage at that point if that's the player making. Probably something else differentiated in that lineup.
JEW wants to know for a DK GPP, Tatum and Bamba or Murray and Brown. That is Tatum and Bamba for me. Pawnage method. Zeke going to get good minutes if Gordon is out, or does he get decent minutes regardless with Jokic out? You know, I'm not exactly sure. I'm curious to see the starting lineup. I wish we knew Denver's starting lineup now. If Zeke Naji starts, I would love to play him, but I feel less good about him if it's DeAndre Jordan starting, because if Naji starts, I think we're probably projecting him for 26, 28 minutes. If DeAndre Jordan starts, and we're probably looking at like 18 minutes or something like that from Zeke Naji. But then also we've got Bones Highland questionable, Aaron Gordon's questionable. There's a lot of variables in the mix. I'll just say this. Prioritize who's starting for the Denver Nuggets, and it's hard to know who that is this far out. I think one thing that does make sense is to get a good amount of Aaron Gordon into lineups, because I think he's a really strong play if he's in there, and people are not going to end up rostering Aaron Gordon, and that's going to give you some flexibility also to swap, because if Aaron Gordon gets ruled out, then you get some more Jamal Murray, gets more Michael Porter Jr., those kind of guys. Jets World wants to know Love or Porter on DK. I have more of Love.
Yeah. Love is a guy who's been just kind of lurking at the top of boards all day long, just based on the expectation of minutes with Jared Allen out, the pricing at 5,600, multi-position eligibility on DK, power forward center, same positioning for 4,900 on the FanDuel slate. He's just kind of been sitting up toward the top of the board and not really impacted, because you can move him around a little bit because he's so low priced for a guy who's a 1.18 fantasy points per minute performer this year, 1.16 fantasy points per minute performer.
I'm going to have to cut you off.
Go ahead.
We just got the starting lineup for the Cavs. Kevin Love not in it, it looks like.
Hey, how about that?
I just thought, let me see, because it says Lamar Stevens is starting for Jared Allen. My assumption is that means that we are getting Kevin Love coming off the bench, I would assume. So
that would make sense. Do you think that impacts his overall minutes projection from what we had then? Or do you think he just picks up the same minutes off the bench, potentially playing against second unit guys?
Unfortunately, probably a couple less minutes for Kevin Love. So now that's going to change some stuff. Was not expecting Lamar Stevens to start.
Yeah, we had him 28 and change as of my last update. Call it what, 24?
It's hard to expect him to get to 28.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd go as low as 24, but 26, I think is. I think 26 is in play. I'm not going to be able. I'm just going to end up waiting until.
Yeah.
I'm just going to end up waiting until after the slate locks and then just recrunching lineups, because by the time I redo a crunch for this news, it's going to be past the slate already locking. And we've got some time. That game starts at 8:00 Eastern time, so we got a full hour and 2 minutes. So I'll definitely be rerunning lineups, and anything that also ends up coming across when our projections get updated, I'll be informing you guys of what we end up doing minutes wise with Kevin Love. But it has to be a negative for his minutes. Best case scenario is he plays the same minutes. The most likely scenario, not that it's a death sentence to him, but it's a couple less minutes.
Yeah, I'm going to see how much he's coming up in these lineups that I'm hopefully getting entered into this contest right now, and then we'll deal with it after.
Always a curveball right at lock. By the way, Jets World, Porter is now the answer to your question. I gave him the answer, and then news comes out that changes my answer 45 seconds.
That was
later.
Incredible timing. Gotta love those.
Always good timing. Super chat from Gray Hair Gaming. Tell me I need to redo my DK lineup. White, Dinwiddie, Hardaway, Wood, Bamba, SGA, Healed, Miles, Turner. I don't really have a lot of exposure to Heald or Miles Turner. And I know he just asked us that question like a minute before the slate locks, but
yeah, I was going to focus on those guys a little bit more if we got the Halliburton out news. Not that it directly impacts a guy like Turner, but I would just think, a little bit more expectation of things to do. But with Halliburton in, I wasn't really forcing any of the Pacers.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the question was asked so late that I don't really think there's anything actionable there, but I don't think they're terrible plays. It's just not guys that I was prioritizing on this slate. If I was building one lineup, neither of them would be in it. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I'm just trying to scan here.
Oh, good. Hey, that happens. NBA DFS. You think everything's set to go. You sit there, you meticulously build your lineups, and what happens? It's like House of the Dragon at the end. Like you're all ready to go, and then here comes Vagar flying overhead to fuck everything up. Shit changes around here. Let's see if we have the minutes update for Kevin Love and see where we are at on him. For me, like I said, I feel comfortable giving him 26 minutes. And I think that's a good middle ground because I don't think that's at his floor. I don't think it's at his ceiling either. Somewhere in between where I'm not overexposed to Kevin Love, but he still ends up coming up in lineups for me.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly fair. I haven't been able to track down where I've got him owned in the current slate of lineups. But once I get this organized and loaded up into Cruncher.
Oh my God. Now the Heat lineup. Boy, everything is different. Everything is one way and then everything changes right after. So the Heat lineup. Oh boy.
That's a lot of Kevin Love.
Lowry, Strus, Butler, Martin, Jovic at center. By the way, Jovic is like 205 pounds, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they said Adam said that on the show this morning, and I was like, "Woof, boy, that is not a center." What did he say? Like 6'10", 205, something like that?
Yeah, Jovic. So Jovic's official dimensions is he's listed at 6'10", 205 pounds, 93 kilograms. For those of you who are more familiar with that system.
93.
Yeah, that is okay. So this changes all. We got news in the last 2 minutes that's made a lot of what I said over the last course of the show fairly irrelevant. Not entirely, but obviously Dwayne Dedmon still in play. I like him a whole bunch less though. Now here's one thing that's kind of annoying. I would have played way more Mo Bamba. I mean, I have Mo Bamba in 60% of my lineups right now. I would have had even more of that had I known about this Dedmon news before. Because now Dedmon's going to take a haircut for me.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, with Dedmon at such a low price, I'm not going to panic about lineups where I've got him in and think that I've got to get him out of there. Because we were seeing with, a 20, 22-minute projection, him being basically viable at that price. What I do think it potentially takes away is a little bit of the upside of the Dedmon play, right? You might lose a little bit off the ceiling rather than off the floor. So there's a little concern there. But I'm going to see where I've come up. But I totally agree. I would want to have had even more Mo Bamba. I'm just hoping I got to enough of them as is. And I'll find that out momentarily. And there's way too much Kevin Love in these lineups. That's going to be fun. Well, they should have been watching.
But also, I didn't really ruin anything because I didn't say anything.
That's also true.
It's actually really funny if you guys watch.
He didn't even say like who. He just said they look up. Like, it could have been anybody.
If you guys watched, by the way, Mo Bamba is 36% owned in the $15 on DK. Also, I think there's a case to be made. What is the time lapse on spoilers? This wasn't a spoiler, but what is the time? Like, meaning how much time is allowed to elapse before you could talk about something that's happened in a popular movie or TV show? Like, this has been a month.
Yeah, I think a month is pretty solid, especially if it's something where, people claim that they're watching, claim that they care. If you've been watching and you care, and you haven't caught up within a month of a show that's that immensely popular, that's that widely talked about, have you been also just completely avoiding the internet for the last month? Like those shows, you get those spoilers in headlines if you go to various entertainment sites. So yeah, I think a month in this day and age is more than enough time. And then you get the people who complain if you reveal that Sonny Corleone gets shot on the causeway in The Godfather. Like that movie came out 50-ish years ago. Let's be realistic, people.
I do think that's a funny thing to say though. Like if you're on social media, you just make your bit. Anybody talks about any movie or TV show, just be like, yep, spoiler. It's like
Yeah.
somebody's talking about On the Waterfront. It's like spoilers. Like, come on, spoilers.
Yeah, it is definitely a fun bit for sure. But yeah, if we're talking reality, I think, you got to be up to speed on these things. I was away for like a week. I missed an episode of Andor. I missed a couple White Lotuses. I'm all caught up already. I've only been home for like 2 days. Everything's on demand. Should be easy for you guys to catch up with this.
So I have got to update the Heat now. No real hurry because we've got about 30 minutes here. But what are we doing with this news, Terry? Because this is the next thing to drop. And it's not something I was expecting. Earlier, I know somebody brought up in the chat and saying, hey, remember when I said that Jovic only weighed 205 pounds? Yeah, he still only weighs 205 pounds. That hasn't changed. But it was just not what I was expecting from the Miami Heat starting lineup. But let's look at some of the box scores from Jovic because not a lot of data to go off of. So Jovic this year has played four games. He's played 6 minutes. He's averaging 4 fantasy points. I can't pull anything from that. He's played about 20 minutes in his NBA career. Is he a good fantasy producer? Is he bad? Who the hell knows?
Yeah, I mean, his name sounds like a good fantasy producer from what we know. So that's the best thing I can say about him. Sounds a little bit like a guy who puts up major fantasy points and isn't playing tonight. But yeah, this guy, 0.71 FanDuel points per minute is what that all mass out to. 0.69 DK points per minute. But we're talking about 20-ish minutes for the season. Not any real clue what to make of them, but this kind of would fall into that category where I was saying before, I'm just trying not to get overly excited about breaking news around pieces that I don't understand, pieces that are not don't understand, but pieces that I don't actually know anything about. This kid could come out here and put up with just, nice little 15, 18 fantasy point night. I'd say that's probably likely. Is it likely for this kid to come out here and break the slate tonight? Even at that price, I don't necessarily think so. And when we had Dedmon already at that price, at that positioning, I think there's some good reasoning to, maybe stick with the Dedmon side of it, trim it, like, don't go crazy over the top, which is what I'm going to be focusing on doing over the next little bit because I've got a lot of Dedmon. So I might trim some of it, but I don't know that I'm going to be rushing to roster Jovic here.
Yeah, I'm going to be in the opposite side of that. I'm pulling up his Eurobasket stats. And by the way, the European League is not an easy league to play in. Like the Euro League is higher competition than the come on, load. All right. So the Euro League, which is higher level competition than college basketball, for instance, Jovic, whose numbers were up in front of me a second ago. But like how biased do you think I might be based on what his name is? Is there bias that's leaking in there that I'm not aware of?
I definitely think there's some bias leaking in, but it's probably not just you. It's probably, industry-wide bias just from the name, the almost name recognition there. So yeah, a little bit, but if there's supporting numbers, I'm curious to hear them from the Euro League, because that is, to your point, a very good league, and a league where a lot of these guys come in as young kids and play against veterans, solid men. So if they're putting up numbers as young guys, it does speak to their ability and their upside sometimes. But I just don't know. I'm going to have to wrestle with getting a lot of Kevin Love and a lot of Dwayne Dedmon out of these lineups, or just kind of ride with it and see what happens here. So I'll be curious to see how that works in, but I don't know that I'll want to mix and match so many pieces to work him in on FanDuel. For example, I'm looking at him and I think he was just power forward. I just went away from it.
Yeah, he's power forward. Yeah. By the way, he actually doesn't have stats listed here. Last year, he had pretty good per minute numbers. He also only played 4 games last year, which also sucks. There's so little information to go off of here, but for what it's worth, in the 4 games he played last year in the Euro League, he played 24 minutes per game, averaged 12 points, 6 rebounds, about a steal, a block, and an assist and a half. It's hard to say. I mean, it's really a shot in the dark. He's somebody who's really difficult to project. I don't know what his minutes are going to look like. I'm curious if he's not going to be owned, though, which I'm not sure is the case or not. He's a value play. He's the flat min on DK, 3,000. You could fit him into multiple lineup spots with him being power forward eligible. He's playing power forward, or the utility spot. At 3K, I think he's a really good value play, especially because of when this news came out.
Yeah, at 3K on the DraftKings slate with the ability to put him in the util spot and power forward, I think there's a little bit more upside, a little bit more viability. It doesn't look like anything's come through on our Boom Bust tool just yet in terms of how that's going to impact the slate between him and Dedmon. On FanDuel, it's just a little bit more difficult the idea of switching from min price center Dedmon to min price power forward, it just changes the dynamics of way too much in some of these lineups where I don't know that it's something I want to chase by moving him into those spots. So a little bit different of a situation from site to site. I think I'm probably going to leave him on the table. I think I might run still with some of my min price Dedmon shares. I'm not that worried about that Dedmon spot at 3,500 at the center spot. And I do have quite a bit of it. I'm going to see what's in some of these lineups as we're talking through it and see where I can change. But yeah, that's one I'd maybe be more inclined if I wasn't on a show to be digging into a little bit more. The Kevin Love spot is still concerning me a little bit more.
Super chat from June Sosa 21. No question. He just left in a 199 super chat. Oh, here it is down bottom. He did. Dedmon or Jovic on FanDuel? For me on FanDuel, I'm going to say Jovic, but I don't think either of them are crazy high priority. Jovic is my answer amongst the two of them, especially because we just got ownership projections that came in, and Jovic is still projected to be fairly low on. Dedmon's ownership has come down, but Jovic is still only projected for around 1% ownership, whereas Dedmon is now around 20%. So with that in mind, I'm going to say Jovic as the guy for me. Our projections have just recently updated. We have Jovic right now at 18 DK fantasy points, 21 for Dedmon. That is for DraftKings. Over on FanDuel right now, we have Jovic projected also 18 fantasy points and Dedmon at 21 for FanDuel. But I'm going to lean towards Jovic with him starting for me personally.
I still think I'm going to lean Dedmon just because it's center versus power forward. And we've got so many of those guys that slot into the power forward that are also center eligible on FanDuel that I think it just makes some sense. I don't want to occupy a spot with Jovic there when I think I can get more upside out of some of these other power forwards, where occupying the spot at center, I think is okay with Dedmon, if that makes sense. And we got Dedmon slightly higher still on the projection, slightly higher on some of the probability numbers.
So I'm updating my lineups right now. And
what did we do with Kevin Love in this last update? That's the one that's killing me right now.
Yeah, because I had that up as well. So Kevin Love, we took his minutes down to 25.
Okay. That's going to be a concern. Let's see.
It's funny how much, because NBA DFS is so price sensitive, it's funny how much 1 or 2 minutes will drastically change how much exposure you get to a player in a projection.
Absolutely. It's a dramatic impact when, it changes the base from which the standard deviation is going to work. And you get an underperforming game at 25 minutes, it's going to be well under the salary value there, where if you get an underperformance at the 28 and change minute projection that we had him, just the expectation of minutes might carry him to a round value for that price. So it really is a matter of 1 or 2 minutes on either side can just completely change the nature of a play.
My Phil Arc says he's leaning towards fading the Miami bigs. That's also something you could do. He says Jeff Green or DeAndre Jordan, though. I lean towards DeAndre Jordan over Jeff Green, unless Green ends up starting.
Yeah, as we've said multiple times, I think that's just a matter of keeping an eye on the starting lineup with Denver there. But I would probably expect that DeAndre is going to get the start, and I would probably lean in that direction.
All right, let me start updating some of these lineups and see what ends up happening. I have zero expectations right now. I assume I'm going to get to less Kevin Love. I'll be getting to a little bit less Dedmon. Jovic, who I basically didn't have at all, he's going to make his way into some lineups. And I'll do one more refresh of the ownership page to see where we're getting some of the ownership. And actually, Jordan, can you pull up the ownership on the screen? Let's see if we've got an update for the Heat starting lineup here 4 minutes ago. So yeah, this should be including some of the Heat starters. Jovic still projected for basically no ownership. You guys see Dedmon still towards the top. Dedmon projected for 22% ownership on DK. FanDuel projected for 16% ownership. Have you rerun any lineups, Terry?
No, I was just clearing some stuff out of here, and I'm going to see what it does with no randomness on to just give me like what the optimal look at this would be, and then I'm going to rerun it with a little bit of randomness. So kill that.
Who doesn't love a little NBA DFS? How does it always happen? Also, where as soon as the slate locks, everything goes to shit. It couldn't even be 3 minutes beforehand. Couldn't even be 5
Seriously,
minutes before.
yeah, with 5 minutes, I can make some changes on the way in that I would have been much happier with. Mo Bamba being the most drastic one. I did not give him enough of a tweak when I ran that sim, so he didn't come up quite enough for me. So I'm going to be behind the field. So I'm now a big believer in the Bamba spot, but I'm actually actively rooting against the Bamba spot based on where I'm at right now, oddly. So that'll be fun. That would have been the key change on the way in. I would have just made sure to get the most of that, and probably just taken the, like somebody said a minute ago, probably just taking the Heat situation off the board a little bit more had I had that news, 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago. So we will see what happens here. Let me run a quick little, see what happens when I hit this rebuild here.
Jets World is asking, he's asking us a 1v1. He's trying to figure out, it looks like, I'm assuming, a final spot in the lineup. He wants to know Jovic or DeAndre Jordan. I have more exposure to Jovic personally. I'm rerunning lineups right now.
Information as we've got it right now, probably that answer. If we knew for sure DeAndre was starting, then maybe I would lean that direction, but I don't know that you'd necessarily play DeAndre in that. You wouldn't necessarily consider him there if he wasn't starting. Right. So it's probably Jovic, but I still don't love that spot. Like I said, I just don't love rushing to these guys that I just don't have any NBA information about.
It would be different for me if I thought he was going to be popular, because if somebody is going to be unowned, I kind of like the unknown element, right? Where I don't like the unknown element as much is if somebody's really popular, right? Because that to me is a situation where, oh, okay, here's this guy we don't know anything about. He could bust and he's going to be really popular. When we have Jovic right now, and I know he's going to end up being a little bit more popular than this. I'm continuously updating the ownership to see what ends up changing with this. But if Dedmon is going to be considerably more popular than Jovic, which does appear to be the case right now, then I feel I kind of lean into the unknown in that kind of scenario.
I like that thinking, but I like it when it's a guy who can have the ball in his hands, create on his own a little bit more rather than an unknown commodity thrust into a rotation with a group of guys who are going to be doing their thing and not necessarily throwing them the ball. So if this kid is more a collector of rebounds and blocks and points like that versus a creator of points and assists and scoring like that, I would tend to not lean into it quite as strongly. And I just, again, don't know all that much about what this kid does on the floor. So I can't really weigh in too strongly on him one way or the other as far as that goes.
Does it sway that his name sounds close to Nikola Jokic, though?
Absolutely.
Nikola Jokic does a lot of shit on the floor.
Yeah, you just run with that. Birthday narratives, name narratives, and revenge narratives. Just play those and you're fine.
Jokic won, I don't know if I'm allowed to spoil this, but Jokic won the last 2 MVPs.
Oh, damn it. I was going to go back and watch the season from 2 years ago at some point. And you just screwed the whole thing, man. Thanks. Way to go.
By the way, did we get the MLB awards announced yet? Today was Cy Young, was it not?
Oh, was it? I, having been away and all of that, a lot of stuff fell off my radar.
I'm just curious. I'm not sure what the
I kind of wish I hadn't looked at my phone though, based on that.
I stand to win a lot of money
announced.
for Verlander wins MVP, which I assume is just a formality at this point, but I would like it to be official.
For who?
Verlander.
Oh, all right. I like that. I mean, I don't like that because he's on the Astros and all of that, but I think it's a smart bet. I like it from a betting perspective. Where do you think he ends up this next season? You think he leaves Houston?
Nah, I think he'll end up staying.
Makes the most sense that he would. Yeah.
What, by the way, so I ended up with around, I just reran my lineups. I ended up with around 10% of Dedmon. That's where I ended up on him. I'm getting to a good amount of Jovic. He's a value play that personally I'm going to be on today. Dedmon, though, I just kind of dispersed elsewhere. Like before we were talking about Larry, like I have like Larry Nance, DeAndre Jordan, Dedmon. These guys are kind of similar to me now.
Yeah, and it kind of came through in this rebuild that I just ran here. Looking at it, debating whether I want to make some of these changes. A lot of the power forward shares on FanDuel just kind of went toward Giannis. I've got a big share of him in this rebuild. A lot of Christian Wood in there. So like I said, I was just getting a lot of those pieces in the power forward role anyway. So I didn't really want to rotate Jovic in and displace a Giannis, displace a Christian Wood with upside. Even like an Al Horford, I was getting to a handful of, and Kristaps Porzingis, some of these other guys where the Dedmon piece in the center spot was working to make some of those happen. Dedmon does come down a little bit. He's in the teens now as opposed to a much higher percentage. Kevin Love basically exits a lot of these lineups. So I'm torn on the Kevin Love spot. I definitely want less of him than I had, but I think I want more of him than I would be getting here, just on the idea that he is Kevin Love and he could put up a decent score even in the 25-ish minutes. And if he does see a few more additional minutes, like there is, just because he's not starting Lamar Stevens I don't necessarily expect Lamar Stevens to go out, blow the doors off this game and get all the minutes. There is the idea that Kevin Love could come in a close game, play a lot more minutes in the second half, close the game, et cetera, et cetera. So I think I want a little bit more of him than what I'm seeing here. But it's an interesting impact that Jovic has on as a power forward only here, or an interesting lack of impact, I guess I should say.
By the way, massive of a stinker of a start to the game from Mo Bamba. He has 1 rebound to this point in the first quarter. So, all right, maybe I am happy.
Excellent. Pull him. He probably needs some rest. Let's yank him.
Anthony Edwards has 11 points and a steal.
Ooh.
So that is the top scorer by a mile on the slate right now. And
he was an oddball that was like on that list alongside like McCollum and some of those other guys. I'm not sure if his name actually came out of my mouth, but he was in that range as like one of those mid-range under 10% FanDuel guys that we talked about. So interesting one. That was one that wasn't leaping off the board at me.
Good start for Miles Turner as well. First 5 minutes of the game, 4 points, 2 rebounds, an assist, and a block. I know that we have a couple of super chats here, so I am going to pull those up. But then also, Jordan, get ready because we'll look over some NHA really quick and look at some of the props they have versus the house before we get out here for the night. So NHA, the sponsor of today's show, a couple of reasons you guys should sign up there. Overlay, always something to take advantage of, and also $50 bonus on the first deposit when you sign up by clicking on the link that we have below. So super chats we have here. I think there was one here. Okay, no, I answered one for my filler arc. The other super chat here. Sotex, last man in for a Yahoo GPP, John Collins or Jamal Murray. That is Jamal Murray for me. I like Jamal Murray way more than John Collins.
I haven't got the pricing on either one of those, but that sounds pretty correct to me.
And then I thought there was one other super chat about somebody asking, where did it go? Oh, you know what? It might have been a Discord question. Let me pull up Discord. Somebody asked about our favorite plays for, I think, 4,100 or lower. Let me see if it was in Discord. I definitely remember, unless I had, here it was, Lucky. In single entry, top 3 utilities under $4,100 for DK. All right, so utility, $4,100. Which players do I projected the best under that mark? 4,100. One of them for me personally is going to be Jovic, but also Tim Hardaway Jr. Easy.
Yep,
Tim Hardaway Jr. Jovic is going to be one for me as well if you need to go really cheap, and then Peyton Pritchard.
Okay, I like the Pritchard call. The 3,400 sitting there. Yeah, nice little 11-ish% optimal on DK. He's a little over-owned for that. And Adam was talking on the last show about the potential fragility of those minutes. But I think there's enough expectation for that price and his talent level that he could coast to at least delivering around value on that salary around the median projection with some upside there. I do like the White side of that equation a little bit. I brought him up earlier in the show just as the starting guard with some opportunity there and a fair mid-range price. But as a value play, I think Pritchard definitely makes some sense.
And a couple other questions we got. One is that the Maharishi saying that it's Nikola Jovic bobblehead night. I find that to be unlikely, and nor does that matter for my DFS lineups. But hey, if it's Jovic bobblehead night, so be it. And Jetsro wants to know, does Butler become a better play with this new starting lineup? Butler remains unchanged. I mean, I can't imagine Dedmon versus Jovic has any kind of real measurable impact on Jimmy Butler. Do you feel any differently on that?
No, it's just two different guys that Jimmy Butler won't necessarily want to give the ball to. And Butler's going to be Butler, and he's going to have a big assist rate with the other guys off the court. He's going to do Jimmy Butler things. His assist, they were talking about on the show or previous to us. Also, his current assist rate is just astronomical with those teammates missing. That'll come down, but that's still going to be part of what he does well with those missing components. But yeah. Overall, I expect it to be within reason of within a standard deviation and a half on either side of his normal Jimmy Butler-ish type game.
Oh, by the way, something else also, I forgot where the game is being played. The game's in Toronto. It's certainly not Nikola Jovic bobblehead night in Toronto. Yeah, bobblehead night for a road player. That would be new.
That would be a little bit odd. It would, if anything, if that was the case, like if it came out like, no, that's actually true, I would expect that they're somehow handing out Nikola Jokic bobbleheads at that game for whatever reason, even though he's a visiting player as well. I just wouldn't expect that it's Jokic.
And by the way, somebody pointed out also that Bradley Beal is going nuts. So I usually keep track of the stats on the NBA app while we're doing the show, but that's just total shit right now. It's not showing any games being played, which I know is not the case. Sandy Alcantara officially has won the National League Cy Young, by the way. Before we head out here, Jordan, let's get to some of those props over at NHA. Do you put those on screen? Because I know neither Terry or I could see NHA from New Jersey.
Bull with a nice little start. 17.6 FanDuel points in the first 8 minutes of the game.
Yeah.
8 points, 3 boards, 2 blocks.
All of the stats that I think we would have liked Mo Bamba to have. Also, Mo Bamba, super weird stat line. He has only shot 3 so far. He's 0 for 3 from the field, all threes.
That's one way to go when you're Mo Bamba. 20% owned on FanDuel, 2 rebounds, 2.4 FanDuel points, 0.5 X value so far.
Not great. Not the best.
Not ideal.
Here we go. See, this is where my shitty eyesight becomes an issue. Okay, there we go. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you for zooming in. I'm sitting here, I'm like looking at it real close and squinting. Jordan's about to say that I have a big head because I'm sitting too close to the screen. Jordan, very mean to Terry before we started. He's telling Terry that a gigantic pumpkin head. It's like, that's not nice.
It was just basically all quotes from Mike Myers' father from So I Married an Axe Murderer, the Scottish guy. Look at it. It's a virtual planetoid.
Go to so it looks like we're getting some points props from the Celtics Hawks game. That starts in a few minutes. Let me see if any of those stand out. So go all the way to the top.
What are we looking at here? NHA?
Yeah, NHA, some of the props against the house.
NHA board here.
And they've got Jaylen Brown over under 27.5 points. It's fairly efficient. If I had to take one side, I would lean towards the under. 33.5 looks like a very high number for Jason Tatum. I love Jason Tatum, and this is a good spot for him. 33.5. That is a crazy high number.
33.5 real life points?
Yeah, that's a very high prop over under.
That is pretty high. We've got him projected, at least as when I updated this, at 31.93, which was playing strong in there against the field contest, where his line was only 27.5. But since we're talking about a line that's over where we've got him projected, a line that's over what he's been averaging for the season, which is 31.9 in his 37.5 minutes a game, I definitely think that one might want to look at the under on that one. Seems pretty strong.
Yeah, and then just for reference, I'm going to pull up DK and FanDuel. They have Tatum also over under 31.5. So that to me, just if you're line shopping, you're looking for different value, different places. DK, FanDuel have the over under 31.5 for Jason Tatum points, 33.5 for NHA as a potential prop play. I think that one makes sense. Trae Young 28.5. That looks low to me. Trae Young 28.5. I think that's an over. So Trae Young, just also from a line shopping standpoint, he has an over under. So actually that is more in line with sports books, but still I have Trae Young projected over 28.5. I like the over on that mark. The other ones look pretty efficient to me. Terry, any feelings on 28.5 as an over under for Trae Young?
Is right around where we've got him projected against the 26.5 line in there versus the field contest. We had him 59% to go over with a 28.14 projection. Looking at his numbers for the season, 26.9 real life points in 35.1 minutes. Got him projected out around the same minutes expectation, 34% usage. I don't really see a major uptick there, but it's Trae Young. He could easily outpace that number on any given night, just on the back of who he is. Looking at some of the volume numbers, he's taking 7.5 threes a game and only making 2.3. So you could see some expectation of his threes going up a little bit, which would carry the scoring average up a little. So I don't think it's one to, maybe hammer all that hard, but it's not out of the question either.
And then it looks like we got some Heat props there, which I'm curious to see if they have anything up for Dedmon. No, just Butler and Kyle Lowry. That's also a super high prop for Jimmy Butler. I know somebody said before, Does Jimmy Butler's expected output change with Dwayne Dedmon not being in the starting lineup? To me, the answer is no, but 27.5, that's just a very high number for Jimmy Butler. Can you see where we have Jimmy Butler's points projected for tonight?
We had him projected at 23.25, 23.25 real life points. So if that's that high, yeah, that seems like one that we might want to chase the under on a little bit. For the season, Jimmy's averaging 21.6. So we're actually giving him a little bit of an uptick there in terms of what he's done in raw scoring. We talked about, the assists percentage that he carries when these other guys aren't on the court. So there's more for him to do. He's going to be a facilitator a little bit more than, on the fully healthy version of the Heat here. But yeah, I think that is inflated in terms of pure points prop. So that might be one to chase the under on.
So it was really going nuts early. Bradley Beal coming back off the COVID list, 10 points, 3 rebounds, 4 rebounds, and a steal in the first few minutes of the game. So
wow,
Bradley Beal doing a little bit of everything for the Washington Wizards. Guys, we've made it to the end of the show. A lot happened, a lot of news, a lot of different moving parts. Thank you for sticking with us. If you didn't do it yet, do us a big favor. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and good luck with your lineups tonight.